Get comfortable. Let the day loosen its grip a little. Tonight we are going into a room that Victorian novels almost never bother to describe, even though a great house could not have lasted a week without it. You have probably pictured a still room as a lady's scented curiosity cupboard, muslin bags of lavender hanging in even rows, a copper still brought out once a year for the pleasure of the thing, rose petals drying on a clean sheet while someone in silk walks past and breathes in, decorative bunches, idle fragrance, a pretty annex to the drawing room used when the weather was fine and there was nothing more pressing to do. That is the fairy tale version. It is the one that turns up on chocolate boxes and in costume dramas, and it is not the room you're about to spend a working day inside. The real still room is locked. It has a range that must be lit before the family stirs. It holds the household's loaf sugar, its tea, its brandy, its bottled fruits, its medicines, and the recipes no one below stairs is trusted to copy out. The person who keeps those keys is not ornamental. She is not filling an idle hour. She works from the dark of the morning until after the last dessert has gone upstairs, and almost nothing she produces will ever be set down under her name. The day starts before dawn and does not stop until well past dark. The work is sugar and steam and exact measurement, and the door stays locked because what is inside it is worth more than the person who tends it. If this kind of long, slow history suits you, you already know the rest. Subscribe if you have not, and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what the clock says there. I do read them. Let the room go soft, and let us go back. It is 1876. The place is Gloucestershire, a country house of the kind that still keeps 20 indoor servants and a walled kitchen garden, far enough from London that the grocer's cart comes twice a week, and the ice house is not a luxury but ordinary provision. Late September. Outside, the air already carries wood smoke and wet leaves. The stubble fields beyond the park have been cleared. Inside, before anyone has risen, the stone passage that leads to the offices is cold enough that a lamp would show your breath. You are 26. You have been still room maid in this house for 4 years. The wage is £16 a year, paid quarterly, with tea and sugar allowed, and a room shared in the attic with one other woman. £16 is not a fortune, and it is not nothing. A kitchen maid in the same house takes less. The cook takes more, and the housekeeper more again. You occupy the awkward middle the still room has always kept, too skilled to be ranked with the girls who scour the pans, not indoor upper staff in quite the way the lady's maid is, and responsible for stores whose shop value in any single month would cover your wages several times over. The house you know by smell as much as by staircase, beeswax on the main flight, coal and dripping from the kitchen, damp wool in the boot hall, soap and hot linen from the laundry on boiling days. Your own door, when you open it in a little while, will smell of loaf sugar and dried rose and the cold ash of yesterday's fire. That door has a lock. The key rides on your bunch, and the kitchen maids are not given a copy. Neither are the housemaids. The housekeeper has a master key, as she must. Everyone else stops at the threshold. You came into the post at 22, after 2 years as a kitchen maid in a smaller house, and a short spell helping in a still room where the cook still claimed the preserves as her own. This house is large enough to keep the work separate. That separation is the whole of your standing. It is also the whole of your risk. The sugar, the tea, the spirit, the isinglass, the wax, the bottled fruit. If any of it runs short without an entry in the book, the question comes to you first. Upstairs, the family is still asleep. The master is the sort of man who is away more often than not once the season starts, land and magistrate's business, the ordinary work of an estate this size. The mistress writes the menus with the housekeeper and does not come below stairs except on the rare morning she wishes to see the stores with her own eyes. There are children old enough for a governess, young enough that nursery tea is still a separate service. You do not serve them directly. You send things up. Jams, honey, a particular tea, flower water for the dressing rooms, cold cream in small pots. That is the shape of your contact with the people whose names are on the gateposts. You will spend the entire day producing what they will use, wear, eat, and praise, and you will not once be asked into the rooms where those things arrive. Here is what people get wrong about a house like this, and it is worth having it plain before the fire is even lit. They imagine it runs on 2 engines. The dining room, where the food appears as if by arrangement with the air. The drawing room, where letters are written and callers received, and the family sit as if sitting were the work. Those are the rooms that get written down. They are the rooms in the novels, the rooms in the published memoirs, the rooms guests remember when they write their thank you notes. A great house runs on 3 engines, not 2. The third is a locked workroom off a back passage with a small range, a marble slab, a deal desk, and cupboards that would empty a village shop if their contents walked out the door. That room feeds the other 2. It scents the dressing rooms. It polishes the furniture the visitors compliment. It bottles the fruit that will appear in January as if January grew peaches. And because it is not a public room, it barely exists in the written record. Cooks leave memoirs. Ladies leave diaries. Still-room maids leave a book of receipts in 4 different hands, none of them signed with a full name, and a set of keys that go back to the housekeeper when the post is given up. The fiction the house maintains is simple and expensive. It is the fiction that breakfast assembles itself, that the tea tastes as it does because the grocer is reliable, that the dressing table bottles arrived from town, that the furniture simply shines, that the dessert ices are an extension of the cook's art, and that none of this required a locked specialist workshop and a woman who has been trusted with spirit and sugar since she was 22. The labor required to keep that fiction standing is not light. It is measured in copper pans and quarterly wages, and a door that is locked from both sides of the day. That is who you are about to be, for 1 full day. The day ahead is already spoken for. It is late September, which in a Gloucestershire kitchen garden means fruit arriving faster than any one pan can take it. Damsons first. The last of the late plums, quinces coming in from the orchard, hard as fists and yellowing. The first walnuts if the gardener has been down to the trees. Herbs for drying before the frost takes the leaf. Preserving is at full pitch and will stay there until the ground hardens, and the still room in these weeks is less a quiet office than a small factory of sugar and steam. Jars already line the marble. More will be filled before supper. The family reserve will sit in the front row of the cupboard, labelled in your hand. The servants' hall jam will sit behind it, the same fruit, a coarser sugar, a shorter boil, and no one upstairs will ever taste the difference, because no one upstairs will ever be offered the back row. The stores must be checked and locked, as they are every morning of the year. Sugar and tea and spirit are the easiest things in a house to thin out, a spoonful at a time, a twist of paper carried away, a bottle that sits a little lighter than the book says it should. Households of this size treat that thinning as a moral problem, not a bookkeeping one. The person who holds the key is hired as much for the appearance of honesty as for the skill of a set jelly. You have held the key for 4 years. The book has balanced. That is not a small part of why you are still here. Tonight there is a dinner of 18. The note will come down in the housekeeper's pencil, if it has not come already. Extra dessert ices and a quince cheese. That means the still room works after the kitchen has sent up the joints and the cook has sat down to her own plate. Ices if the ice house has held. Quince cheese turned out of its mould and glazed. The spirit cupboard opened for the brandy that goes into the jelly, then locked again. Footman will collect what you finish without stepping more than a pace inside the door. You will not taste the ices at the servants' supper. You never do. Between the dark of the morning and that locked cupboard at night, there is the rest of the ordinary load, which does not pause because the garden is heavy or because 18 people are coming to dine. Flower waters for the dressing rooms, rose and orange flower, a small still, or the infusion pans if time is short. Breakfast trays, coffee roasted and ground here, chocolate scraped, tea measured from the caddy that stays locked when you are not standing over it. The medicine cupboard, which is only another kind of store, black currant rob and lemon barley and peppermint water, labeled and dated so last autumn is not confused with this one. The housekeeper's inspection, which arrives whether the pan is on or not, orders to the grocer, the oilman and the chemist, cold cream on the marble, potpourri for the linen press. Beeswax and turpentine melted down into the cream the housemaids will spend tomorrow working into tabletops so the house looks as if no one labours in it. Afternoon tea assembled as if the drawing room had produced it, and through all of it the border with the kitchen, which is not a line painted on the flags but a daily negotiation. Cook owns the range in her own room, and the joints and the gravies. You own the sugar, the preserves, the morning beverages, and the desserts that count as confectionery rather than cooking. The border holds because both of you need it to. It frays on a day like this, when fruit is coming in from her side of the house and sugar is leaving from yours. You will light a fire that no guest will ever see. You will mix a tea the family believes arrives from the grocer already blended. You will send flower water upstairs that the lady's maid will pour as if a shop in town had bottled it. You will write orders, label jars, compound a household bottle, melt wax, and lock the spirit cupboard. By the time you climb the attic stairs tonight, your fingers will be stained and your hair will smell of sugar and herbs, and the house above you will have eaten well without once naming the room that made half of what was on the table. But that is later. First there is the dark, and a washstand shared with another woman, and a print dress, and the particular weight of a bunch of keys in a pocket before dawn. The house is not stirring yet. Your door is still locked, and you are the one who will open it. 5:30, and the attic is still dark enough that you find the washstand by memory. The ewer is cold. It was filled last night from the tap in the passage, and the water has sat in the china all those hours, taking on the temperature of the room. You pour a little into the basin. The sound is thin and particular, a narrow stream hitting porcelain, and the woman in the other bed does not stir. She is a housemaid. She will not rise for another 3/4 of an hour. Her work begins when the family floors need doing, not when a range needs lighting. You wash your face and neck and hands. There is no hot water up here. There never is. Not at this hour. Not in the servants' attic of a Gloucestershire country house in 1876. The soap is yellow and household, the same bar the whole landing shares. You dry on a towel that has already been used twice this week. The window sits low under the eaves, a small square, and through it the September morning is only a grey suggestion. Below you, 3 floors of the house are still asleep. The family, of course, most of the upper servants, the kitchen even. You are among the first. The print dress hangs on the peg where you left it. Dark cotton, a small sprigged pattern that does not show stains the way a pale cloth would, the sort of stuff a still-room maid is expected to wear and a lady's maid would not be seen in. You step into it and do the buttons by feel. Over it goes the Holland apron, unbleached linen, stiff from yesterday's wash and still carrying a faint smell of lye. The cap next, white, starched, set straight. Stockings, boots, the everyday sequence you could complete in the dark, which is fortunate because the dark is what you have. Then the keys. They hang on a nail beside your bed, a short iron bunch on a worn leather strap, and they are the reason you are paid more than a kitchen maid and trusted with a door of your own. Tea caddy, sugar loft, spice boxes, spirit cupboard, the still room door itself. A kitchen maid is not given these. A housemaid is not given these. Even the cook, who rules a larger room and a hotter fire and a staff of her own, does not hold the spirit key or the key to the locked tea. Those belong to the housekeeper's department, and the housekeeper has handed them to you. You drop the bunch into the deep pocket of the apron and feel the weight settle against your hip. 4 years in this post and that weight is still the first true fact of the morning. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a house of this size. People who have never lived below stairs picture a single pyramid, butler at the top, scullery maid at the bottom, and everyone else slotted neatly in between. The truth is messier, and the mess is the point. This house keeps about 20 indoor servants. The butler governs the men, footmen, the hall boy, the odd man if one is kept. The housekeeper governs the women, housemaids, the still room, the linen, the stores. The cook governs the kitchen and everyone in it, and she does not answer to the housekeeper on the matter of a joint or a sauce, any more than the housekeeper answers to the cook on the matter of tea or wax, or the key to the brandy. The lady's maid answers to the mistress and to almost no one else. She takes her meals with the upper servants, dresses in black, and walks through rooms you enter only to deliver a tray. Between these four authorities, the rest of the staff is sorted, and the sorting is not a chart anyone hangs on a wall. It is a set of habits, enforced daily, about who may sit where, who may speak first, who carries keys, and who waits to be handed a finished pot at a threshold. You sit in an awkward middle. You are not kitchen. You are not quite upper. Not in the way the cook and the housekeeper and the lady's maid are upper. You do not dine in the steward's room. You take your meals in the still room itself, or sometimes at the end of the servants' hall table, depending on the press of the day and on the housekeeper's mood. Your wage is £16 a year, paid quarterly, £4 at a time, which puts you above the kitchen maids and the younger housemaids and well below the cook, who may be earning 35 or 40, and below the housekeeper, who will be earning more than that, and below the lady's maid, whose wage is often nearer 25 and whose Christmas box from the mistress is a separate and quieter matter. £16 is not nothing. A farm labourer in this county might see 12 or 14 in a good year, and he would not be housed or fed as you are housed and fed. But £16 is also not a fortune, and it does not purchase the status that the cook's larger figure purchases, or the intimacy with upstairs that the lady's maid's figure purchases. What it purchases is a locked door and a set of keys, and the understanding that the sugar, the tea, the spirit, and the preserves are your responsibility, and that if anything goes missing, the housekeeper will come to you first. The still-room maid is a specialist the house cannot quite decide how to rank. Older households, Georgian ones, sometimes treated the post as a junior housekeeper in training, a woman who might one day take the keys of the whole store. By the 1870s, that path has narrowed. Printed groceries have begun to arrive from town. Chemists sell what used to be compounded at home. Some houses of this size have already let the post lapse and folded the work into the kitchen or onto a senior housemaid. This house has not. The mistress still wants flower waters made on the premises. The housekeeper still wants the tea blended here, and the jam put up from the garden fruit. The dinner tonight will want ices and a quince cheese that the cook will not consider her business. So the post remains, and you remain in it. 4 years now, 26 years old, skilled enough that replacing you would be an inconvenience and not so senior that anyone upstairs needs to know your name. You take the candle from the nightstand, light it from the last coal in the tiny attic grate, and close the door on the sleeping housemaid without waking her. The back stairs are uncarpeted deal, narrow, turning on themselves, and they smell of dust and old soap. Your boots make a soft, regular sound that you have long since stopped hearing. No one else is on these stairs yet. The kitchen maid who lights the great range will be down in a few minutes, the scullery maid after her. For this short descent, you have the dark of the house to yourself. The still room passage is on the ground floor, on the kitchen side of the house, but not in the kitchen. You know you are close before you see the door, because the air changes. Even cold, even before the fire is lit, the room leaks a little. Sugar first, the dry, sweet dust of it, which gets into wood and plaster and never quite leaves. Dried rose from the jars on the high shelf, last summer's petals still giving off a thin, tired scent. And cold ash, the smell of a range that went out last night and has sat ever since, iron and cinder, and the faint sourness of a hearth that wants lighting. You will change that smell within the quarter hour, for now it is the smell of a workshop waiting, your door, Not a baize door, not a green one like the ones that muffle the family rooms. A plain painted door with a good lock, and the lock is the entire argument of the room. A still room is not a passage. Footmen do not cut through it on their way to the dining room. Kitchen maids do not wander in for a pinch of this or a cup of that. The gardener's boy, when he comes with baskets, knocks and waits. Even the cook, if she wants sugar in a quantity that requires your scales, sends a message or stands at the threshold. You put the key in, turn it, and feel the bolt draw back with the small solid click that begins the working day. Inside, the dark is thicker than the passage. You set the candle on the deal table and let the light find the shapes you already know. The range against the inner wall, black, compact, nothing like the kitchen's great iron beast, but enough for preserving pans and a kettle and a small still. The marble slab to the left, cold even to look at, where creams and ices and anything that must not take a flavour from wood will be worked later. Cupboards along 2 walls, some of them locked, their doors flush and unlabelled to anyone who does not already know what they hold. The high shelf of dried stuff, rose, lavender, mint, the last of the elderflowers, paper bags and jars in a row. The desk under the window, if a north-facing slit with bars can be called a window. And on the desk, the still room book, closed, with a pencil laid in the gutter where you left it. Stone flags underfoot, already holding the night's cold. 1 wooden chair, a row of copper pans hung by their handles, dull in the candlelight, waiting for the fire to give them something to do. You stand for a moment with the keys still in your hand and the door open behind you, and you do what you do every morning, which is to look at the room the way a person looks at a tool she is about to pick up. This is not a lady's scented cupboard. There is no muslin here, no decorative bunch of lavender tied with ribbon for the pleasure of looking at it. There is a specialist workshop attached to a country house, locked because what it contains has a retail value and a social value and a trust value, and because the person who works it is expected to be the only one who knows at any given hour exactly how much loaf sugar is left and which jar of damsons is last year's. The house above you will never be shown this room. Guests will eat what comes out of it and dab on their wrists what was distilled in it, and sit on furniture polished with what was melted in it, and they will do all of that without crossing this threshold or hearing its name. You hang the working keys on the hook inside the door, keep the spirit key in your pocket, and close the door behind you. The lock is not needed from this side while you are in the room. The point of the lock is not to keep you in, it is to keep everyone else out. A kitchen is a thoroughfare of a kind, maids crossing, the cook calling, boys coming in with coal. A still room is not. Once the door is shut, the room is yours until the housekeeper comes at 11, and even she will knock. The candle makes a small circle on the table. Beyond it, the copper pans throw back a dull suggestion of themselves. You have been awake for perhaps 20 minutes. The house still has not stirred in any way a guest would notice. In a few minutes, you will lay the fire and put a match to it, and the smell of cold ash will give way to kindling and then to the particular dry heat of a still room range coming up. And the kettle will go on the hob, and the day that was only a set of keys in a dark pocket will become a set of tasks in a lit room. For this last moment, though, it is still only you and a locked specialist's workshop at the bottom of a sleeping house, and the faint mixed scent of sugar and rose and ash that no one upstairs will ever be asked to name. You kneel at the grate and lift yesterday's ash into the iron pan, working by the same candle until there is light enough to see the bars. Kindling waits where you stacked it last night, on the left of the hearth, a twist of paper underneath and 2 small splits of pine across the top. The match takes on the first strike. You hold it to the paper and stay on your knees until the wood has caught, because a still room fire that goes out in the first 10 minutes costs you the better part of an hour, and the morning will not wait. Coke goes on once the flame is steady, not too much, not packed so tight that the draught cannot find it. The damper is drawn open. The little oven door stays shut. A still room range is not the kitchen range. It has no pretension to joints or roasts. What it must do is keep a kettle at the simmer, hold a preserving pan at a rolling boil later in the day, and give you a hob steady enough for a saucepan of cream or a small still. The oven will take a tray of biscuits or a pot of something that needs only a gentle heat. That is the whole of its ambition, and it is enough. The kettle, filled last night from the tap in the scullery passage so you would not carry a full one through the dark, goes onto the hob as soon as there is any warmth at all. 6 o'clock. Above you the family rooms are still shuttered. 2 doors along the same passage, the kitchen maid will be raking her own fire about now. The cook will not be down for another hour. Your fire is yours. No one else lays it, and no one else is trusted to leave it. The first real heat arrives as a change in the air rather than a glow you can see. Cold gives way. The smell of ash thins and is replaced by the dry, almost sweet scent of a range coming up, coke and iron, and the faint mineral tang of water starting to move in the kettle. You set the candle aside. Daylight, at the end of September, is only a grey suggestion at the high window, but it is enough to work by once your eyes have adjusted, and you will not waste wax on a room that is about to be useful. The store cupboards open in a fixed order, the same order every morning, because a still room that is inventoried by habit is a still room that does not lose things. First, the sugar. The sugar loft, if it can be called a loft, is a high cupboard built into the thickness of the wall, dry, dark, and locked with a key that lives on your ring and nowhere else. Inside, the loaves stand in their blue paper, conical, hard as plaster, waiting for the nips. There are 4 whole loaves and the remains of a 5th, already nipped down to a rough stump. Beside them, a stone jar of crushed sugar for everyday sweetening, and a smaller jar of sifted sugar for the things that must be fine. You do not count the loaves every morning. You look at them. Looking is enough once you know the cupboard well. 4 loaves and a stump is what 4 loaves and a stump looked like yesterday. If it were 3, you would know before you had finished turning the key. Tea next. The caddies sit on a shelf of their own, tin-lined, locked, the outer box of polished wood with a brass plate that has been rubbed bright by other women's hands before yours. A black china tea, Congo, occupies the larger compartment, a darker leaf the smaller, and a twist of something scented lies in paper that you will use so sparingly the family will never isolate the note and ask its name. The key to the caddy box is not the same as the key to the sugar loft. It is smaller, and it lives on the same ring, and you will feel for it a dozen times today without looking. Spice boxes after that, whole nutmegs, cinnamon in quills, cloves, mace, a little ginger, all of it bought from the grocer in quantities the housekeeper has already approved, all of it kept from the damp and from the kitchen, where spice has a way of walking. Bottled fruits from last summer and the summer before occupy the next cupboard entirely. Cherries in brandy, raspberries in their own syrup, greengages, a row of damsons already dwindling because the cook borrowed 2 jars in August for a pudding and has not yet been asked to account for them. You note the gap. You will mention it when the housekeeper comes. Dried herbs hang or lie in paper on the highest shelf, last July's work, labelled in your own hand. Mint, lemon balm, sage, thyme, a bunch of lavender that has gone pale. The labels matter. An unlabeled jar in a still room is a small failure, and small failures accumulate. You close each door as you finish with it. Nothing stands open. The room is already warmer. The kettle has not yet boiled. Household account books from houses of this size allow us to reconstruct the costs with reasonable precision, and the first figure that matters this morning is the sugar. A single loaf weighs something near 14 pounds when it is whole. 100 weight of loaf sugar, which is 8 such loaves, or 112 pounds in the old measure the grocer still uses, will run a country house something close to £2 in the mid-1870s. The duties came off sugar 2 years ago in 1874, and the price has fallen since the days when a housekeeper treated every loaf as if it were plate. Even so, £2. Your wage is £16 a year, paid quarterly, £4 at a time, handed over in the housekeeper's room with the other indoor wages, and noted in a column that will never be read aloud at dinner. £4 then, against the cost of 100 weight of sugar. Half a quarter's wages sitting in one dry cupboard in blue paper, waiting for the nips. The house will go through more than that before the preserving season is out. Late September is the damson month, and after the damsons, the last of the apples, and after the apples, the marmalade oranges if they come in time, and none of that work is done with a light hand on the sugar. A well-run country house of this size, 20 indoor servants, a kitchen garden in full production, a dinner of 18 tonight and the ordinary family meals around it, may spend across a year something in the region of £15 or £20 on sugar alone. That is more than you earn. It is more than the kitchen maid earns. It is, in a lean year, not far off what the housekeeper herself is paid. The tea is not cheaper by the pound, though you use less of it. A decent congu, the sort a Gloucestershire family of this standing will drink without comment, and send back if it is dusty or weak, costs between 3 and 5 shillings a pound. The caddy you unlocked holds perhaps £4 of mixed leaf. That is a sovereign or near it in a wooden box the size of a prayer book. You measure it by the spoon, not by the handful. The family will drink what you send up, and will not ask what it cost. They will only ask, if they ask anything, why the breakfast tea is not as it was last week, and you will adjust the blend by a spoonful, and they will be satisfied, and no one will write down that the adjustment was yours. This is not a complaint. It is the arithmetic of the room. The stores you unlocked in the last quarter of an hour are worth more than several months of your life, and they are worth that every morning, and the reason you hold the keys is that the house has decided you will not take any of it home. The still-room book lies on the desk under the window, where the grey light is strongest. It is a thick volume bound in worn calf, the spine cracked, the first pages browned. You open it as you open it every morning, not to read a recipe yet, but to remind yourself of the running list at the back, the one that tells you what went out yesterday and what must go out today. 4 different hands have written in this book. The oldest is small and upright, the ink faded to brown. A woman who was here when the present cook was still in the scullery, if the dates in the margins are right. The next is larger, a little hurried, fond of underlining. The third is the housekeeper's, unmistakable, because she writes the same way in the store's book upstairs. The fourth is yours. None of them is signed with a full name. Initials sometimes, a date, a note that the quince cheese of 1873 was too stiff, or that the rose water of a particular July was pale and should be distilled again. The book is a working object, not a memoir. It will outlast you. It outlasted the 3 women whose writing sits above yours, and it will be given to whoever comes after, and she will add a 5th hand, and she will not sign her name either. The recipes themselves have the same quality. They assume you already know how to clarify sugar, how to judge a set, how to stop a cream from turning. They give quantities and a few cautions. They do not explain the work to a stranger. A stranger is not supposed to be in this room. You turn to today's page and write the date in the same spare hand you used yesterday, the 18th of September, 1876. Then you close the book for now. Breakfast will not wait on a ledger. What must go up is already decided, and has been decided for years. 2 jams, honey, a pot of marmalade, the tea. The jams come from the front row of the preserve cupboard, the family reserve, not the back row that will go down to the servants' hall. One is raspberry, last July, still a good colour. The other is strawberry, a little darker, the fruit whole enough to look as if someone had been careful. You wipe the pots, check the papers under the lids, and set them on the tray that will be collected at the door. The honey is in a stone jar with a wooden lid, last year's comb strained in this room in August, clear and thick. The The marmalade is from January, Seville oranges, bitter enough that the family will take it as a sign of a proper household and not as a grocer's jar with a printed label. You have 3 pots left of that batch. 2 will see them through October if they are not greedy with it. The 3rd is already promised in your head to the breakfasts of early November unless the housekeeper has other ideas. The tea is the part that does not come out of a jar. You unlock the caddy again and measure into the breakfast caddy, the smaller one that travels upstairs, a blend the family believes is simply the tea they have always drunk, kongu for the body of it. A little of the darker leaf for colour and strength. The scented twist is left where it is. Morning tea is not the hour for that. You mix it on a sheet of paper with your fingers, lightly, the way you were shown in your first month here, and you tip it into the travelling caddy and lock both boxes again. No one upstairs will know the proportion. The lady's maid, who will pour for the mistress if the mistress breakfasts in her room, will not know it either. The butler, who will make the pot for the breakfast room if the family comes down, will measure what you have given him and call it the house tea, as if the house itself had mixed it. The kettle boils. You scald the pot that stays in this room, the one you will use later for your own cup if there is time, and you set it aside. Breakfast tea for the family is not brewed here. It is measured here. The brewing happens upstairs or in the servery by hands that will never see the caddy box open. On the marble slab, last night's work has cooled enough to handle. 2 small pots of apple jelly, made at the end of yesterday because the fruit would not keep another day, sit with their papers drawn tight. They are not for this morning. They will go into the cupboard with the rest once you have labelled them. You write the date on 2 squares of paper, apple jelly, September 1876, and you tie them on with thread. Your hand, again, no full name. The room is properly warm now. Steam has begun to mist the lower part of the window. Outside, if you stood on a chair, you might see the kitchen garden wall and the top of the damson trees, but you do not stand on a chair. You wipe the slab, set the breakfast tray at the end of the table nearest the door, and listen for a step in the passage. No one is coming yet. Trays go up later. You have time. The fire is drawing well. The stores are what they should be. The book is dated. For the next hour, the still room will belong to water and copper and the first small still of the day, and the breakfast things will wait at the door like a message you have already written and do not need to sign. The still lives on the shelf beside the spice boxes under a cloth because copper takes a stain if the air of a sugar room sits on it all night. You lift the cloth and bring the body down with both hands. It is not large. A household of this size does not keep a great still any longer. What you have is a pot of perhaps a gallon, copper, tinned inside, with a close-fitting head that you grease at the join with a smear of flour paste so the vapour cannot slip away. The worm is pewter, a coil no thicker than your finger, and it sits in its own small tub, which you fill from the kettle and will have to refresh as the water warms. The receiver is glass, a wide-mouthed bottle that has been used for this and nothing else since before you came. 7 has come without anyone needing to tell you. The light at the window is the thin grey of a late September morning, enough to work by if you stand close to the glass, not enough to make the far cupboards honest. You set the still on the hob where the heat is steady rather than fierce. Flower water wants patience. It does not want a rolling boil. Last June's roses are in the upper cupboard, dried on sheets in this same room when the weather held, then packed into paper and tied. The scent when you open the parcel is faint and sweet and a little dusty, nothing like the garden at midsummer, but it is enough. You crumble the petals into the body of the still, not packing them, leaving room for the water to move, and you pour on spring water from the stone bottle that the garden boy filled yesterday and left at the threshold. Orange flowers are another matter. The orangery does not bloom in September. What you have is a sealed jar from the oilman, dried blossoms bought by the ounce, pale and brittle, smelling more of tea than of orange until the heat finds them. You measure a handful into the smaller infusion pan, the tin one, because a full distillation for orange flower water is not warranted when the dressing room bottles are only low, not empty, and because bought blossoms do not give up their scent the way a fresh petal will. This is the cheaper method, and you use it more often than the still. An infusion pan is a basin, nothing more, set over water, the flowers steeped, the liquor strained through muslin and bottled. It makes a serviceable water. It does not make the fine water. The still, when you run it properly, with good petals and a slow fire and the worm kept cold, gives you something that can sit on a dressing table in a cut glass bottle and not disgrace the house. You run the still for the rose, because the dried petals will still yield if you are careful, and you set the infusion for the orange, because that is what the stock and the season allow. You fit the head. You set the worm in its tub. You place the receiver so the drip will fall cleanly into the neck and not wander down the outside. Then you wait. Distillation is mostly waiting. The first vapor is only water. You let it come and you let it go. And when the scent changes, when the drip at the worm's end carries rose instead of plain steam, you move the receiver under and you begin to collect. The copper body is dented on one side where someone years ago set it down too hard. The tinned lining is wearing thin at the bottom. You will mention that to the housekeeper before Christmas because a worn tinning will give the water a taste, and a taste in rose water is a thing that cannot be hidden once the bottle is open. The pewter worm has a dull bloom that you rub off with a cloth before each use. Pewter is softer than copper and takes a knock if you are careless with the tub. The join between head and body is the place that fails first. Flour paste is the old seal, cheap and clean and easily washed away after. Some houses use a lute of clay. This house has always used paste. You know because the book says so, in the second hand, the one with the heavier downstroke on the letter D. The copper pot on the hob is older than you are, and older than the housekeeper, and it has not always belonged to a servant. 100 years ago, and 200, the still room was the lady's own workshop. Tudor gentlewomen distilled. Stuart gentlewomen distilled. It was not a curiosity, and it was not something done for amusement on a wet afternoon. It was part of what a woman of standing was supposed to know. The way she was supposed to know how to keep a linen press and how to read a receipt for a cordial. The printed books of the 17th century, Hannah Woolley's among them, assume that the reader is a lady with a still, a garden, and hours enough to stand over both. Cordials came out of those rooms. So did rose water and cinnamon water and the strong waters that were spirits by another name, drawn off for the cupboard and for anyone in the house who needed them. That last part is what went. Household spirit distilling faded under the excise. The Crown had learned in the last century that gin and brandy were easier to tax if they could not be made quietly behind a kitchen door. Private stills required licenses. Licenses cost money and brought inspection. By the time a house like this one was hiring still room maids instead of expecting the mistress to come downstairs with her own keys, the making of strong waters at home had become more trouble than it was worth and slightly less than respectable. Brandy was bought in. Spirit of wine was bought from the chemist, already rectified, already duty paid, in bottles you unlock from the spirit cupboard and measure by the spoonful. The still remained. It remained because flower waters were not spirits, and because a copper pot with a worm was useful, and because houses do not throw away a thing that still works. What you are running this morning is a remnant. The shape is the same. The purpose has shrunk to scent, and to the dressing rooms, and to the few culinary waters the cook will send for when there is a jelly to set. You do not spend the hour thinking about any of that. You watch the drip. The scent arrives before the liquid has filled a finger's width of the receiver. It is not the garden. Dried rose, distilled, smells cleaner and thinner than the bush, more like the inside of a linen chest than like a border in June. It fills the workroom anyway. It finds the sugar bags and the spice boxes and the damp wool of your apron and sits there, No guest will ever stand in this doorway and breathe it. The still room is not on the circuit of the house. When the family has people to stay, the visitors see the hall and the drawing room and the dining room and, if they are the right sort of visitors, the conservatory. They do not see the stone floor or the copper or the pewter coil in its tub of cooling water. They will meet this water later, without knowing they are meeting it, on a handkerchief or on the inside of a glove, and they will suppose, if they suppose anything, that it came from a shop. You keep the fire low. Too much heat and the water comes cloudy, and cloudy rose water is a waste of last June. You change the water in the worm tub once, pouring the warmed lot into the slop pail and refilling from the kettle. The drip is steady. You will have perhaps a pint by the time you need to stop for the breakfast trays, enough to bottle for the 2 dressing rooms and to put a little aside for the cold cream you will make after noon. The infusion pan is doing quieter work and making less perfume. Orange flower water from dried blossoms is a pale cousin of the real thing. You will strain it, bottle it, and label it honestly with the date and the method, so that whoever opens it next winter will not take it for a distillation. The lady's maid will know the difference. She will put the rose water on the principal dressing table and the orange on the spare room, or she will mix them, which is her decision and not yours. Here is the chain, since no one else will set it out. You crumble the petals. You run the still. You bottle the water and write the month. You leave the bottles on the shelf where the lady's maid knows to look, or you send them up through the housekeeper if the housekeeper prefers it that way. The lady's maid carries them upstairs. She sets them among the silver-backed brushes and the pin dishes. Later, after the bells, the lady sits down and the lady's maid opens the bottle. A little is poured into a glass dish, or onto a cloth, or into the basin. The lady touches it to her wrists and to her throat, and goes down to breakfast, smelling faintly of a June that you packed into paper in this room. No one in that chain says your name. The lady does not know it, or knows it the way she knows the name of a clock. The lady's maid knows it and will not use it in that room. The water is simply there, as water is supposed to be there, as if dressing tables produced it by themselves. This is not a complaint. It is the shape of the work. You wipe a drop from the lip of the receiver with a clean corner of cloth and you check the paste at the join, still tight. The room smells like a florist's back premises and like wet metal. Steam has taken the rest of the window. You cannot see the damson trees now, even if you wanted to. A door bangs in the kitchen passage. The house is properly awake. Breakfast will be wanted soon, and the trays at the end of the table will need the last of their loading. The tea you measured, the coffee that is still only beans, the chocolate, the jams. The still can run a little longer. You will bank it when the footman knocks. For now the drip continues, small and even, and you stand with your back to the door because the worm tub needs your eye more than the passage does, and because this hour of all the hours is the one in which the still room does the oldest work it knows, and does it for people who will never come down the back stairs to watch. The knock comes before the hour. Not the footman's knock. The kitchen maid sent along the passage to ask whether the breakfast jams are ready, because cook is plating the eggs and will not have the trays held up for want of a pot of marmalade. You bank the still with a small shovel of slack, just enough to keep the worm from cooling too fast, and you wipe your hands on the holland apron and turn to the table. The trays have been waiting since you laid the cloths. 2 for the breakfast room. A smaller one for the housekeeper's room because she often breakfasts there when the family is in residence and the morning will be long. White linen, folded once. The silver pots that live in this room and not in the plate pantry, because they are for tea and coffee and chocolate, and they are your charge, and the plate pantry does not hold the keys to the caddies. By 8:30 the still room has changed its work. The flower water can wait. Breakfast cannot. You take the coffee first. Yesterday's roasting is in the tin, the beans already darkened and cooled, smelling of the fire more than of the berry. You measure them into the mill and turn the handle. The grind is even if you do not hurry it. Too fine, and the pot will silt. Too coarse, and the family will send word that the coffee is weak, and the word will come down through the butler or the housekeeper and land on this table as if the beans themselves had failed. You empty the mill into the pot, set the pot on the hob at the side of the range where the heat is steady, and you do not leave it. Coffee boiled hard is ruined, and ruined coffee cannot be hidden under cream. The chocolate is next. A cake of it, dark, wrapped in paper, kept in the dry cupboard because damp will bloom on the surface, and then the scraping is wasted. You set the cake on the board and draw the knife across it in long, thin curls. The curls go into the chocolate pot with sugar from the loaf you nipped this morning and a little of the milk the dairy sent up. The pot sits beside the coffee. 2 heats, 2 smells, and neither of them belongs to the kitchen. Tea last, because tea is the one they will notice if it is wrong. The caddy is locked. You take the small key from the bunch at your waist, the one that is not the still room door and not the spirit cupboard, and you open the lid. The blend is already made. You mixed it last week from the 2 chests the grocer sent, one darker, one lighter, in the proportion the house has used since before you came, written in the still room book in a hand that is not yours. You measure into the pot with the spoon that lives in the caddy, never with a kitchen spoon, never by guess. Then the lid goes down and the key turns. In a house of this size, the tea is not left standing open. It is too dear for that, and too easy to thin. On the trays, beside the pots, you set what the still room sends up every morning that the family is at home. 2 jams. The strawberry from June, the blackcurrant from July, a pot of honey from the estate hives strained in this room in August. Marmalade in the cut glass dish the housekeeper prefers for the breakfast room, because the breakfast room is where the light is good and the glass shows. A small plate of sugar, nipped fine. Nothing hot from the range except the pots themselves. The eggs, the bacon, the kidneys, the cold ham, the toast, those will come from the kitchen on their own dishes, and they will meet your trays in the passage or at the breakfast room door, and they will look, to anyone sitting down, as if they had always belonged together. They have not always belonged together. That is the first thing to understand about this hour. Cook owns the kitchen range and everything that comes off it in the way of joints and gravies and the long labor of a dinner. You own the sugar, the preserves, the tea, the coffee, the chocolate, and the morning beverages that go upstairs as if they were as simple as water. The border between those 2 kingdoms runs along the flags of the passage and is redrawn, quietly, every day. Cook will send a kitchen maid for a spoon of loaf sugar and expect it without a wait. You will send upstairs a pot of jam and expect the empty pot back, washed, because the pots are counted. If a breakfast is late, cook will say the still room held the trays. If the coffee is poor, the complaint will not go to cook. It will come here. The kitchen maid who knocked is still in the doorway. She does not step in. She is not meant to. You hand her nothing. She is only the message. You nod, and she goes back along the passage to say that the jams are ready and the pots are on, and cook can send the hot dishes when she likes. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a country house staff. From the outside, it looks like a ladder with clean rungs, housekeeper at the top of the women's side, cook next or nearly next, depending on the house and on who has been there longer. Then the lady's maid, who is not quite in the same line at all because she serves 1 person and not the house. Then you, then the upper housemaid, then the kitchen maids, the housemaids, the scullery, the still room girl, if the house keeps one, which this house does not. 20 indoor servants if you count the men, butler, footman, coachman when he is in, the boy who does the knives and the boots. The wages follow the ladder more or less. Cook may take £35 or £40 a year in a house of this size, and her kitchen. The housekeeper takes as much or more, and her sitting room, and the keys to nearly everything. A lady's maid may take £25, and her work is lighter on the feet and heavier on the nerves. You take £16, paid quarterly. A kitchen maid may take £12, or 14 if she is the first. The numbers are not secrets. They are written in the wage book the housekeeper keeps, and the servants' hall knows them the way it knows who sits where. What the ladder does not show is the way deference runs in more than one direction. You defer to cook in the passage. You do not contradict her in front of a kitchen maid. You do not walk into her kitchen without a reason she will accept. Her range is her range. Her joints are her joints. If she is in a temper about a dinner of 18, which she will be by this afternoon, you keep your voice even and your requests short. That is one kind of deference, and it is real. Cook defers to you in the matter of sugar. She may send for it. She does not help herself from your cupboards. She does not unlock your caddies. She does not write in your book. If the housekeeper wants an account of the loaf sugar, it is your account she wants, not cook's. That is another kind of deference, quieter, and it is also real. The kitchen maids defer to you because you hold keys they will not be given, and because you may be asked in a year or two to speak for one of them if a still room place opens in another house. You defer to them in small ways that cost you nothing and keep the passage civil. You do not keep them waiting at the door. You do not send them back twice for the same message. You call them by the names they are called in the hall, not by a tone that makes the work heavier than it is. The lady's maid is a different weather. She comes to your door for the flower waters and the cold cream and the little pots that go on the dressing table, and she is civil, and you are civil, and neither of you forgets that she goes up the front stairs in the morning and you do not. She will be thanked, sometimes, in the room where the bottles are opened. You will not. She knows that. You know that. The knowledge sits between you like a folded cloth, not unfolded, not denied. On the women's side of the house, this is how rank works when it is working well. It is not friendship, it is not war, it is a set of weights placed and replaced so that the trays go up on time and no one has to say out loud who may enter which room. A house of 20 indoor servants cannot run on affection. It runs on this. The coffee has come to the right color. You take the pot off the hob. The chocolate has thickened enough. You give it a last stir with the rod and set the lid. The tea waits for the water, which you pour now, just off the boil, into the pot that already holds the measured leaves. 3 pots, 2 trays, the jams, the honey, the marmalade, the sugar. You check the cloths for a crease that would show in the breakfast room light. You check the silver for a mark from your own fingers. Then you stand away from the table and you wait, because the next person through that door is not a kitchen maid. The footman's knock is different. 2 short raps, and he is already speaking as the door opens, because he has a breakfast to put on the sideboard and he has no time to admire a workroom. He does not come farther than the threshold. His livery is for upstairs. The still-room flags are for you. He takes the first tray, then the second, and his eyes go to the pots and not to your face, which is as it should be. He will carry them along the passage and up, and he will set them where the breakfast room expects them, and he will not say to anyone who asks that the coffee was ground in a room behind the kitchen. He may not even know that it was. His work begins at the door. You watch the trays leave. The passage takes them. A minute later you hear, faintly, the kitchen door and cook's voice, not angry, only quick, sending the hot dishes after. Eggs, bacon, the rest. The 2 processions will meet upstairs and become a single breakfast, and the people sitting down will pour the tea and spoon the marmalade and think, if they think at all, that breakfast is a simple thing a house provides, the way a house provides windows. Then the door is shut, and for the first time since you came down in the dark, the still room is quiet, not silent. The range ticks. The still, banked gives an occasional small sound as the last of the heat moves through the copper. Somewhere in the kitchen, a lid goes down hard, but the rush has gone out of this room. The trays are no longer your problem. The breakfast room will send no word unless something is wrong. And if nothing is wrong, you will not hear from it again until the pots come back, empty, to be washed and locked away. You stand for a moment with your hands on the edge of the table. The marble slab at the far end already holds what you set there earlier, before the trays, jars. Not many. A first batch, cooling, the glass still warm if you were to touch it. The labels are not on yet. Labels come when the set is certain and the tops are tied. For now, they are only jars, dark with fruit, sitting in the September light that has finally reached the stone floor. You wash the mill, you wash the chocolate board and the knife. You rinse the measuring spoon and dry it and put it back in the caddy and turn the key. Each thing goes to its place, because if it does not, the next hour will find you hunting for it while the housekeeper is in the doorway. The holland apron has a smear of chocolate near the pocket. You notice it and leave it. There will be worse than chocolate on it before the day is done. Outside, in the passage, a housemaid goes by with a scuttle. The house is fully at its morning now. Upstairs, they are sitting down, or standing at the sideboard, or coming in late from the stables, and the coffee is being poured by a hand that did not grind it. You take a cloth to the table and wipe the scatter of sugar and the fine dust of the beans. The cloth comes away brown and white. You shake it at the back door, into the yard, where the morning is already further on than it is in this room, and you come back in, and you close the door, and you look at the cooling jars because they are the next true work, and because the quiet will not last. It never does. Not in September. Not with a dinner of 18 tonight and the damsons waiting and the housekeeper due at 11. But for these few minutes, the still room belongs only to itself. The range, the slab, the locked caddies, the faint leftover scent of coffee under the older scent of sugar and dried rose. You turn one jar a quarter turn to see the set from another side, and the glass is still too warm to call finished. You leave it. You will come back to it. The morning has a long middle yet, and the keys at your waist are quiet against the print of the dress, and the trays, for once, are someone else's to carry. The jars are cooler when you come back to them, but they are not finished, and you do not wait on glass. A thin strike reaches this side of the house from a clock on the back stairs, not loud enough to count as a summons, only enough to mark the hour if you have been listening. You have. 10 o'clock is the cupboard in the inner wall, the one with the second lock, the one a kitchen maid is not sent to open. You take the small key from the bunch at your waist. It is not the store cupboard key, and it is not the spirit key. It turns with a dry click that you know by sound as well as by feel. The door swings on a hinge that has been oiled because you oiled it, and the smell that comes out is not the sugar and rose of the rest of the room. It is drier, paper, old spirit, peppermint that has gone faint in the jar, a sweetness that belongs to syrup left too long in a warm month. This is not a sick room. You are not opening it as if it were. The shelves are a store, and you read them the way you read the sugar loft and the tea caddies. What is low? What has dated itself past use? What must be made again before someone upstairs asks and finds the bottle empty? Dark glass on the middle shelf, stoneware on the lower, a row of smaller bottles with parchment tied over the corks, the knots still tight, labels in more than one hand. Some of the writing is brown with age, some of it is yours. You take down last July's blackcurrant Rob first because the level has dropped, and because September is not the month for fresh currants. The bottle is heavy. The syrup inside has the dark of stewed fruit and the slow movement of something boiled long enough to keep. You hold it to the light from the window. No cloud, no ferment at the shoulder. You set it back a little forward of where it stood, so that the next hand, yours, next week, will take this bottle and not the older one behind it. The still room book is already on the desk. You open it to the pages that are not jam and not polish. The headings are short. Rob, barley, peppermint, lavender. The same spare lines as the preserved receipts. The same refusal to explain themselves to anyone who does not already know the work. 4 hands again. None of them a full name. You find the black currant in a writing older than yours, the quantities given by weight, and the method given as if the reader had made it 20 times, which, if she had the post, she had. From the store you bring a bottle of last summer's currant pulp, the one put down when the bushes in the walled garden were stripped in July, and the kitchen had no more use for what the pies had not taken. Sugar from the loaf you nipped this morning, a small pan, not the preserving copper. The rob is a reduction, not a set. You measure, you stir, you keep the heat low enough that the sugar does not catch. The smell that rises is sharper than jam and less polite. It belongs in this cupboard, not on a breakfast tray. When it coats the spoon the way the book says it should, you take it off, and you let it stand, and you do not taste it as if it were a pudding. You taste for the sugar and for the boil, the same way you taste a syrup, and then you set it aside to cool before it goes into clean glass. Lemon barley next, because lemon barley is asked for in every season, and because the pearl barley in the jar is getting low enough to note, you rinse the grain, you put it on with fresh water. While it simmers, you take lemons from the store, the ones that came in with the grocer's last order, and you pare the peel thin, no pith if you can help it, and you squeeze the juice into a basin that will not hold the taste of onion or of vinegar, sugar again. The barley water, when it has given what it will give, is strained through cloth into a jug, and the lemon and the sugar go in after, and you stir until the grains have gone. This is a drink as much as it is anything else. It appears on a breakfast table and in a schoolroom, and on a tray sent up for no reason anyone in this room is told. You are making a stock, you are not making a treatment. The distinction lives in the way you label it, and in the way you will send it, and in the fact that you will not follow the jug out of the door. Peppermint water is a smaller job. The still from the morning is cold now, and you do not light it again for a household batch. The infusion pan is enough. Dried peppermint from last year's hanging, the leaves crumbled between your fingers over the pan. Hot water poured on, the lid set, the time kept by the same clock that struck 10. When you strain it, the liquid is pale, and the smell is clean and a little medicinal, which is only to say that it smells of the plant, and of hot water, and of the cloth. You bottle it warm enough to discourage the air, not hot enough to crack the glass. A drop of spirit of wine from the locked cupboard goes into the neck, because the book says so, and because a water without it will not keep the winter. The lavender is for the housekeeper's shelf, and it is the nearest of these 4 things to the flower waters you made at 7. Dried heads, a little spirit, a little water, a bottle that will sit among her own stores and be used on linen and on the corners of drawers and on whatever else a housekeeper uses lavender for when she does not ask you. You do not follow that bottle into her room. You fill it, you cork it, you wipe the glass until there is no smear of the work on the outside. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a cupboard like this. By 1876, a country house does not pretend to be an apothecary. There is a chemist in the market town. There is a family doctor who comes when he is sent for, and who leaves behind him the kind of prepared bottle that has his own label and his own instructions and a price that appears in the household book under a different heading from sugar. Patent medicines sit on ordinary shelves in ordinary shops. A woman in a village can buy a tin or a vial without walking into anyone's still room. The old work of the house, the work a Tudor or Georgian lady once did with her own still and her own book and her own authority, has been thinned by all of that, and by the excise, and by the simple fact that a prepared pill is easier than a morning at the range. What remains in a cupboard of simples is not a practice. It is a remainder. The word itself is older than this house. A simple, in the language the older receipts still use, is one plant used alone. A compound is a mixture. The shelves keep both, and they keep them in the same spirit they keep the marmalade, as stores against a season, written down, dated, replaced when the level drops. Distilled floral waters, herb waters, syrups that sit between the breakfast table and the medicine shelf and do not trouble themselves with the difference. Barley water, a rob, a bottle of peppermint. Things a chemist could sell you, and sometimes does, but that a house of this size still makes because the garden grew the plant, and the sugar is already in the loft, and the still room maid is already paid, and the book is already open. The knowledge is receipt following. That is the whole of it. You do not invent a mixture, You do not decide that a person upstairs needs this bottle rather than that one. You copy the quantities in the book, and you keep the heat where the book keeps it, and you stop when the book says the spoon should coat. Household manuals of the period print pages of the same kind of thing between the chapters on servants and the chapters on dinners, as if a cough mixture and a gravy were cousins, which, in the logic of a still room, they are. Both are boiled. Both are sweetened. Both are put up in glass and written into a list. The difference is not in the pan. The difference is in who is allowed to say what the bottle is for, and you are not that person. What the chemist supplies and what you do not is anything that needs a professional label to be respectable. Tinctures heavier in spirit than a household likes to show on its own shelves. Prepared pills. Compounds that would look in your handwriting like a claim you are not employed to make. The still room keeps the work that can still be called housekeeping if anyone asks. The town shop keeps the work that has already changed its name. You wipe the lip of each new bottle before the cork goes in. Labels from the same sheaf you use for jam, cut smaller. Ink from the desk. The name of the thing, nothing more elaborate than the book uses. The month. The year. You write the year because last year's peppermint water looks in brown glass, exactly like this year's, and because a house that cannot tell them apart will use the wrong one and then decide the still room is careless. Your hand is the same spare hand you use for the sugar loft. No flourish, no full name. A person coming after you will know the bottle by the date and by the contents, not by you. The blackcurrant Rob, when it is cool enough, goes into a bottle that once held something else and has been scalded until it holds nothing. You tie parchment over the cork. You write the label while the glass is still faintly warm under your palm, because warm glass takes the paste and cold glass fights it. The lemon barley, which will not keep as the Rob keeps, goes into a jug for the day's use and a smaller bottle for the next day. And you set both on the marble where the breakfast jams had stood, which is to say in the path of anyone who comes to the threshold and no farther. The peppermint water takes its place on the middle shelf in front of the older bottle, which you do not throw out until you have seen this one stay clear. The lavender you leave on the desk. It is not for this cupboard. It is for the housekeeper, and it will not travel by itself. She has not yet come for the inspection. That is 11, but a folded scrap has already arrived, brought by a housemaid who does not step past the jam, the way the footman did not. The hand is the housekeeper's. The request is short, a bottle of the peppermint water for upstairs and the lavender when it is done. No explanation, you are not owed one. You wrap the peppermint in paper so that the glass will not speak against another bottle in a passing basket. You set the lavender beside it, the cork firm, the outside clean. You do not take them up the back stairs yourself. You do not appear at a dressing room door with a remedy in your hand, as if the still room had patients and you were their attendant. You give both bottles to the housemaid with the housekeeper's name on them, and you watch her turn back into the passage, and you close your door. Whatever happens to those bottles after that is a story that will not include you. The housekeeper will put the lavender on her own shelf and send the peppermint where it was asked for. A lady's maid or a nurse, if the house is keeping one this month, or whoever has the right to open a dressing room cupboard, will take the cork out and use what you made. And if anyone is thanked, it will not be the woman who stood at this range and followed a page without a name on it. That is not an insult. It is the shape of the post. You manufacture, you do not present. The chain that runs from a locked cupboard to a pair of wrists or a bedside table has several links, and yours is the one that is supposed to be invisible, which is why the key is on your bunch and not on anyone else's. You wash the small pan. You wash the spoon. You wring the peppermint cloth and hang it where it will dry without giving its smell to the tea towels. The cupboard of simples is locked again. The dry click, the last sound it makes, and the room settles back toward sugar and fruit skins and the faint ghost of this morning's coffee. The damsons have not yet come in. The housekeeper is not yet in the doorway. You have an hour that still belongs to stores and to the book and to the quiet that always pretends at this time of day that it might last. It will not. You know that. The keys lie against the print of the dress, a little heavier for the small one having been used and put back, and the holland apron has the chocolate smear still, and now a pale dust of barley flour at the hem, and you leave both. There will be damson on it by noon. For the moment, the marble holds a jug and a cooling bottle, and the inner cupboard holds what it held, plus what you have just put into it, dated in a hand that does not sign itself, and that is the morning's other inventory, the one nobody from upstairs will ever come down to admire. The quiet does not last. You knew it would not. Somewhere above, a clock gives the hour, and the sound comes down the stone stairs, thinner than it is in the hall, 11 notes that arrive already a little late. You are standing at the desk with the still room book open to today's page when the housekeeper's step stops outside the door. She does not knock. She never knocks. The handle turns and she is in, and the room rearranges itself around her the way a workshop rearranges itself around the person who can close it. Black dress, as on every morning of the week except Sunday. The chatelaine at her waist carries more metal than yours. House keys, store keys, the key to the plate closet, the key to her own sitting room. She has been in this house longer than you have. That is not a guess. It is in the way her glance goes first to the range, then to the marble, then to the book, and only then to you. You wish her good morning, because that is what is said. She nods. Her attention is already on the cupboards. This is the daily look. It is not a raid, and it is not a compliment. It is the housekeeper doing what a housekeeper is paid to do, which is to know before luncheon that the stores are where they were yesterday, minus what was used plus what came in, and that the person who holds the still-room keys has not grown careless overnight. The sugar cupboard opens first, because that is the order. Loaf sugar on the upper shelf, the cut pieces in the tin, the blue paper still wrapped on the unopened cone. She does not touch. She looks. She knows the weight of a loaf by the shape of it as well as you do. The tea caddies next, the lock on the best one still fast. Spice boxes with their lids true. Bottled fruits from last autumn, ranks of them. Labels facing out so a missing jar would show as a gap. Dried herbs in their papers, last summer's crop, the colour already a little gone. She asks for the keys. You unhook the bunch and set it in her palm. She counts them without appearing to count, the way a person counts who has done it every working morning for a decade. Then the bunch comes back, warm from her hand, and hangs again at your waist. The transfer takes less time than it takes to describe. The book is next. She draws the desk chair an inch, not enough to sit, and reads down today's page. Breakfast, send up. The 2 jams, the honey, the marmalade, the tea blend, the flower waters set going after 7, the simples compounded later in the morning. Your writing sits in the margin, spare, dates and quantities, no flourish. She does not praise the writing. She checks it against what she can see in the room, which is the correct use of a book. The damsons, she says, are coming across at noon. Cook has them. You will want the copper. You already know. You say so. She makes a small sound that might be agreement. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a house of this size. People who have never lived below stairs picture the housekeeper as a kind of senior maid, a woman who inspects linen and keeps the girls in order. That picture is not entirely wrong, and it is not the post. In a country house of 20 indoor servants, the housekeeper is the chief officer of the female staff. She hires and she dismisses, or she recommends the dismissing to the master or to the steward. She keeps the household books that go upstairs. She holds the keys that open the rooms where money sits in the form of tea and sugar and linen and wine. In a house like this, she is paid something in the region of £40 a year, sometimes more if she came with a name that other houses already knew, and she has a sitting room of her own and a girl to wait on her. That is not a maid's wage, and it is not a maid's life. You sit under her. That is the structure, and there is no confusion about it. Your £16 a year comes quarterly, £4 at a time, and it is a respectable wage for a still room maid in the middle 70s, better than a kitchen maid's, not equal to a cook's, and nowhere near hers. She can walk into this room without knocking. You cannot walk into hers. And yet, this is the part the structure does not write down. She cannot replace you on a Tuesday morning if you are ill. She can lock the cupboards. She can read the book. She can tell you the fruit is coming. She cannot, or not without losing a day and spoiling a pan, set a still, or bring a jelly to the right tremble, or judge the set of a preserve on a cold plate, or mix the particular tea the family has decided is the only tea they will drink. Those are not housekeeper's skills. They were once, in another century, when the still room belonged to the lady of the house, and the housekeeper was an extension of her hands. They are not now. Now the housekeeper is an administrator, and you are the specialist she administers. And the difference is the reason this door locks from the inside, and why the keys on your bunch are not the same keys as hers. She knows this. You know she knows it. Neither of you will say it. The inspection proceeds as if she could do the work herself if she chose, because that is how authority has to look in order to remain authority. You stand a little aside from the desk and you wait, and you do not offer information she has not asked for, and that too is the shape of the post. She has a slip of paper already in her fingers. The grocer's order, the oilman's, the chemist's. These go out twice a week from a house like this, and more often in preserving season when the sugar and the jars and the spirit move faster than the calendar. She reads the items she has from the kitchen and from her own stores, and then she looks at you for the still room list. You give it from the book and from the shelves, not from memory alone, because memory is how a thing gets ordered twice and paid for twice and then has to be explained. Loaf sugar. Another 100 before the month is out, if the damsons and the quinces and whatever follows them are to be done properly. 100 is £112, and you say it that way in the old measure because that is how the grocer still sells it and how the book still records it. Crushed sugar as well, the cheaper sort, for the jam that will go to the servants' hall. That goes on the same line in a different column. Isinglass from the chemist. The stock is low, and there will be jellies this week if 18 sit down to dinner, and isinglass is what sets a clear jelly when the stock alone will not do it. An ounce or two. It is not cheap. You do not name the price. She knows the price. Wax. White wax for the cold cream that belongs to the afternoon, and beeswax if the oilman has the right grade. For the furniture cream the housemaids will collect tomorrow. Turpentine with it. She writes turpentine under the oilman without being told. Spirit of wine. The chemist again. Rectified, the kind that will take a tincture and will not leave a taste that then has to be accounted for. It lives in the locked cupboard with the brandy. She glances at that cupboard when you name it, a habit, not an accusation. Her writing is faster than yours and less careful. That is her book, not this one. The still room book stays in this room. The order book travels, folded into the world of men who drive carts and send invoices. Anything else. The orris is getting low. The cloves as well. You name them, she adds them. The paper is already long. September is a long paper month, and the length of it is fruit and sugar, and the things that keep fruit and sugar from spoiling before winter. A brief detour, because the figures themselves tell the rest. Household account books from houses of this rank, the ones that survive in county rooms and in the back cupboards of the houses themselves, allow the costs to be reconstructed with reasonable care. The goods that leave a still room in a single week, valued at what a grocer or a chemist or an oilman would charge a customer in the town for the same things already made, come to something in the region of £2 and closer to 3 in a preserving week. £2 is 40 shillings. Your wage, spread across the year, is a little more than 6 shillings a week. 6 shillings and a few pence. A heavy week then moves through this room a value equal to 6 or 7 weeks of what you are paid to stand in it. That is not a complaint you would ever make aloud. It is not even a thought the house encourages anyone to finish. The sugar is not yours. The tea is not yours. The jam, once it is in the jar and on the shelf, belongs to the house, and the house is not a person you can present a bill to. You are paid for time and for trust, and for the particular skill that keeps the trust from being wasted. You are not paid a share of what the skill produces. No still room maid is. The books do not have a column for that. Walk into Gloucester with a list and buy, over a shop counter, the rose water and the cold cream and a pot of quince and the furniture cream and the bottled fruit and the tea already blended, and you would hand over more in an afternoon than you earn between one quarter day and the next. £4 is a quarter's wage. £4 would not cover what this room puts out in a fortnight of September. The comparison is not one the house asks anyone to make. The house asks you to make the things, and to lock them, and to write them down. You make them, you lock them, you write them down. She has one more paper. It is not in her hand. It has come down from upstairs, folded once, the pencil a little pale, the kind of note written at a writing table after breakfast and given to a housemaid who gives it to the housekeeper who brings it here. That is the proper chain. You do not receive notes from upstairs. You receive them from her. Extra dessert ices. A quince cheese. Tonight. Dinner of 18. You knew there was a dinner of 18. You have known since yesterday. The ices and the quince cheese are the addition. Someone upstairs has remembered or has been reminded by a guest list that a dinner of that size in late September ought to end with something that looks as if the country still provided it, and the house still knew what to do with it. Quince cheese is not a cheese. It is a paste, dense, cuttable, the fruit boiled with sugar until a knife leaves a clean wall, turned out of a mould if you have one handsome enough, or sliced from the slab if you do not. Last year's quinces are still in store, a few of them, wrinkled, still usable, and the gardener will have this year's if they have turned. You will know by noon. Ices are another matter. Ices want ice, and ice wants the ice house, and the ice house is not your department, but the working of whatever ice arrives is. Word will go. She will send it. The chain again. You can manage it. It is not a question. You say, yes. She folds the note once more and leaves it on the desk, on the open book, as if the book had asked for it. One more look at the range, at the marble, at the bottle that has finished cooling. Then she is gone. The door left as she found it. Not locked, because she will not have you locking it against her in the middle of the day. You lock it at night. In daylight, the authority runs the other way. The room is yours again. The keys hang where they hung. The note lies on the page. 18 for dinner, and the still room to furnish the end of it. The part that arrives after the joints and the removes, the part that is supposed to seem light, as if it had cost no one a morning. You turn the leaf in the book and add the work in the same spare hand. Ices, quince cheese, dinner of 18. You do not write that you will manage it. The book does not take opinions. It takes what was done, and later it will take what was used to do it. Noon is close enough to feel. The copper is already in your mind, the weight of it, the way it sits on the hob. Before that, there are the orders to leave as she wants them, and the jug to shift, and the bottle to put away with its date. You close the sugar. You close the tea. For a moment your hand rests on the desk with the pale pencil under your fingers, no name on the paper, the way everything in this room arrives. And then the hand comes away, and the work takes the hour back, because that is what the hour is for, and the hour is already going. The grocer's paper goes on the hook beside the door, the oilman's under it, the chemist's last. You copy the housekeeper's phrasing as she left it. You do not tidy her sentences. The jug is shifted off the marble. The cooled bottle goes up on its shelf with the date in your own hand, and the pale pencil is put back in the trough of the desk where it lives. Noon arrives without a bell. This room does not keep hours that way. The light has come fully onto the stone. a low September light that does not climb the walls so much as lie along the floor. And outside there is a sound that is not quite a knock, only a basket set down too hard on the flags. The garden boy does not come in. He never does. He leaves what he has brought and goes back toward the wall, and you fetch the baskets across the threshold yourself. 2 of them, damsons heaped to the rims, the bloom still on them, that dull blue-grey dust a tree puts on fruit it has not yet given up. They tip onto the table with a noise like small wet stones. A few roll. The side of your hand herds them back into the pile. Stalks first. Always stalks first. Sitting is wiser than standing through a whole basket, because the back will be wanted later over the pan. 1 bowl takes the good fruit. A smaller one takes the stems, the split ones, the ones the wasps have already opened. What remains is firm and cold from the shade of the north wall. The skins give a little under the thumb and then hold. Damsons from a kitchen garden at this time of year are not a luxury, and they are not a surprise. They are what the trees do in late September, and what the still room is for. The copper preserving pan comes down from its hook. Feet set first, because the weight is honest, and the inside is bright from the last rubbing, while the outside has gone dark from years of the hob. It sits to warm while the last of the stalks come off. A cloth takes the rim. A greasy rim will catch the scum later and keep it. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a country house in 1876. The grocer in the market town sells jam. He has sold it for years. Pots stand on his shelf with printed labels, plum and raspberry, and a damson that has never seen a damson tree. And a woman who keeps a small house in the town can walk in and buy a pound of it for a few pence and carry it home and be done. The sugar duties that once made a loaf a serious purchase have come off. The last of them went 2 years ago. Sugar is no longer a treasure. It is a weight in the loft, a hundredweight locked and measured, a thing you count and do not think of as rare. Household account books from houses of this size let the figures be reconstructed with reasonable care. 100 weight of loaf sugar bought in and carried up and broken and boiled costs the house something in the region of £2, depending on the quality and the grocer's terms. Your own year is £16. Paid in 4 pieces. So a single loft of sugar, before it has been nipped or melted or turned into anything at all, sits beside a month and a half of your wage and does not look ashamed. And that is only the sugar. The fruit bought in town would be another sum. You do not buy it. The kitchen garden grew it on land the estate already owns, under a gardener the estate already pays, and the surplus of September would lie and soften on the path if you did not take it in. A good deal of what gets called still-room skill is the garden's overflow, caught in time and given a second life and a label. Why then the copper and the hour and the stained fingers when a crate would come up the drive if someone wrote for it? Because shop jam is not what this house puts on a breakfast table. Shop jam in these years is often apple pulp and a colouring and a fruit named on the label that may have passed through the pot only as a rumour. A guest who has eaten in other houses will know the difference between a damson cooked in the week it was picked and a damson cooked in a factory in a town she has never visited. The difference is not only taste, it is a class mark as plain as the crest on the breakfast china. A house that buys its preserves is a house that has let a department slip. The still room exists in part so that no one upstairs has to make that admission. Volume is the quieter reason. Breakfast every morning. The servants' hall at noon and at night. 18 covers tonight, and the sweets that follow the joints. A grocer's pot is £1. You are not making £1. You are making the winter. The family reserve will stand in the front row of the cupboard until March. The hall jam will go faster and be less mourned. Both will come out of this pan, this afternoon, this fruit. The loaf comes from the store. A cone, dense and pale. Blue paper, still around the base. Sugar nips live in the drawer with the string and the spare labels, 2 blades curved to meet, a spring tightened more than once. Pieces fall into the scale pan, some the size of walnuts, some smaller, crystals catching what light the window still has. The book says the weight. Guessing is not the rule. Equal sugar to fruit for damsons, a little more if the fruit is very sharp, and these are sharp. The smell of them is already in the room, sour dark, not quite plum and not quite anything else. Fruit goes into the copper with a splash of water, not much, enough to keep the first heat from catching. The range has been running since 6. The hob is more than ready. The first sound is not a boil. It is a settling, skins beginning to loosen. Then the color comes, a red so deep it looks brown in the shadow of the pan, and steam lifts and carries the smell through the workroom until the morning's sugar and dried rose and cold ash are gone, and there is only damson. The long spoon stirs. It does not beat. Beating breaks the fruit too early and clouds what should be clear enough to please the housekeeper when she holds a jar to the window. Stones rise as the flesh gives. Some come out on the spoon, some stay. Damson stones are part of the preserve in this house, a few of them, enough to say the fruit was real. An older hand in the book is particular about that, and there has never been a good reason to argue with a hand that made this jam before you were hired. When the fruit has fallen and the juice runs freely, the sugar goes in piece by piece, stirred until the last white disappears. Then the boil. It comes up in a rush, pale foam crowding the rim, and the scum spoon is already in the other hand because it would be. Foam comes off in sheets and tips into the crock that will go out later. It is not for the family table. It has its own quiet uses, or it goes to the pigs. There is no lingering over it. A preserving boil is not a kitchen boil. Thicker, slower, a sound more than a sight. Copper will catch in a minute if attention walks down the passage, so attention stays. Steam films the window. The September light, which had been lying along the floor, turns in the vapor and becomes something visible rather than something stood in. The face is damp. The print dress darkens at the front. The holland apron takes the worst of the spatters and will take more. Time is the pan, not the clock. The set can be read by look and by the way the spoon leaves a path, and still the test is done because the book requires it, and because a soft jam in January is a remark that lasts until Easter. A plate has been waiting on the marble cold from the slab. A little of the preserve drops onto it, a weight, a fingernail at the edge. It wrinkles. Not much. Enough. Another minute, another drop. The wrinkle holds, off the heat. Jars have been warming on the back of the range, stoneware, mouths wiped, insides dry, lading, not pouring. Pouring looks faster and wastes more and leaves a rim that will spoil. The front row jars come first. Family reserve, the clearest of the boil, the best color, the fruit that held its shape, filled to just below the shoulder. Then the second row, the servants' hall, same fruit, same sugar, a slightly darker and less even result, because the last of a pan is never the first, and because the hall will eat it with bread and not with silver, and will not hold it to the light. Brandy paper next. Circles already cut, a stack of them in the tin, each one dipped and laid on the hot surface so the air is shut out. Then the bladders, soaked and soft, stretched over the mouths and tied with string while they are still pliable. They will dry to a drum. They will pull tight overnight. Paper alone will cock and let the mold in. A bladder, properly tied, will see the jar through to spring. Each shoulder is wiped. Labels go on in the same spare hand used for the book. Damson. The date, September 1876, and then the two words that divide the cupboard. Family, hall, family jars to the front of the shelf, labels out, a row that can be counted at a glance. Hall jars behind, same date, same fruit, a different future. No one who eats from either row will know which part of the day made them. That is not a complaint. It is the arrangement. The copper comes off while it is still warm because a cold preserving pan is a harder honesty and goes to be scoured. The table is stalks and stained cloths and a splash of red already beginning to brown. Fingers are the colour of the fruit. The stain sits in the grain of the skin and under the nails, and soap will only fade it. It is not dirt. It is the work showing. Heat stays after the pan has gone. Steam eases. The window clears in patches, and through one of them the kitchen garden wall is a line of old brick, and beyond it the tops of the damson trees, already lighter for what they have given up. The September light has moved. It no longer lies along the whole floor. It has withdrawn toward the west wall and left the rest of the stone in that soft indoor grey that means the afternoon has started without asking. A few of the jar mouths have begun to draw, not the finished seal, only a small contraction, the bladders taking their first pull. The front row is counted. The back row is counted. The numbers go into the book under the housekeeper's note, damson, the two qualities kept separate, because that is what was used and what was made. There will be more fruit before the month is out. There always is. Today is one boiling. The cupboard will want another, and the quince is still waiting, and the ices for 18 will want a clear hour that is not this one. The nips go back in the drawer. The scum spoon hangs. Water on the hands only sets the stain deeper. Underneath, the room smells of sugar again. It always comes back. For a while it smelled like an orchard reduced to a single copper, and now the orchard is in the jars and the air is remembering its other work. Front row labels face out. Hall jars stay as they are. The light finishes its crossing and finds the last of the wet stone near the door. Stained hands hang loose for a moment, not idle, only between one task and the next, which is as close to rest as noon will offer. Then the range, still hot, takes the afternoon back, and the slab is waiting. The marble has taken the morning's heat and given it back. It is cool again, the way it is meant to be, a pale slab that holds no memory of fruit and wants none. You wipe it once with a clean cloth. The cloth comes away faintly pink at the edge, and then comes away clean. Early afternoon in a still room does not announce itself with a bell. It arrives as a change of work, from the copper and the open fire to the things that cannot bear too much heat and will spoil if you ask the range to do what a stone can do better. Cold cream is one of those things. The book is already open on the desk. Not the store book, the other one, the receipt book with the stained thumb marks and the 4 hands, none of them signed with a full name. The cold cream receipt sits in the second of those hands, a close upright script that measures by the ounce and does not waste a word. White wax, oil of sweet almonds, rose water. Some houses add a second wax, dearer, and some add a scent that did not come from their own still. This house does not, or has not since the last time the page was copied. You do not add what is not written. You have learned that the book is not a suggestion. White wax comes from the oilman's last delivery, small cakes wrapped in paper, bleached beeswax that looks like something a chapel might burn and smells, only faintly, of honey that has forgotten itself. You weigh 2 ounces on the small brass scale. The weights are worn smooth at the edges from years of other women's thumbs. Oil of almonds from the locked cupboard, 4 ounces into the glass measure, pale and slow in the pouring. Rose water from this morning's work, already cool in its bottle. The same quantity again, or near enough that the book will not quarrel with you. The measure clicks against the slab. Nothing in this receipt is guessed. The little pan goes on the coolest part of the hob. Wax first, because wax will not hurry, and you do not ask it to. It clouds, then clears, then runs. Almond oil in after, stirred with a clean bone spatula until the two are one pale liquid and no thread of wax remains undissolved. Off the heat, onto the marble. This is why the slab is here and why it is marble and not wood. Wood holds warmth and gives it back at the wrong moment. Marble takes the heat out of a mixture as steadily as a still-room maid takes the scum off a preserve, without comment and without fail. You work it as it thickens. Rosewater added a spoon at a time, beaten in, the spatula turning, the cream going from oil to something that will stand, too fast, and it separates into a slick and a puddle, too slow, and it sets before the water is in. And then you have a grease, not a cream, and the pots are wasted, and the book is no help because the book assumes you already know. 4 years in post means you do. The sound is small, a wet tap against stone, no louder than a clock in another room. Your stained fingers, still marked from the morning, stay off the cream. A cloth between the hand and the work. The pots wait at the far end, 6 of them, white earthenware with lids that fit, scalded after breakfast and left to dry mouth down on a folded towel. When the cream is right, it is neither oil nor water. It is a white that has a bloom, cool already from the stone, and it spoons into the pots without a slack. A circle of paper wet with a little of the same rose water laid on the surface of each, so a skin will not form overnight. Lids pressed home, labels in your own hand, the same hand that dated the jam, cold cream, the month, the year. September 1876. The pots go to the end of the slab where nothing hot will find them. That is 20 minutes if the wax behaves. It usually does. Then the linen. The dried stores live in the upper cupboard, paper bags and small tin boxes. Last summer's work waiting for this year's use. Rose petals, dried until they rustle and darken to the color of old brick. Lavender, stripped from the stalk in July and kept in the dark so the blue would not go grey. Orris bought as a root from the chemist and grated fine on the still room grater. The smell of violets that are not violets at all, but a root that knows how to hold a scent when every flower in the mix has given up. Cloves, whole, from the spice box, counted, not scooped, because a heavy hand with clove will follow the sheets for a month. You measure by the handful and by the book, because potpourri is one of those receipts that looks like freedom and is not. Too much clove and the linen press will smell like a grocer's back room. Too little orris and the scent dies in a fortnight, and the housemaids will be blamed for airing the linen too hard, and no one will think of the mix. The housemaids will put the bags between the sheets and never be told the proportion. That is not unkindness. It is how a still room keeps a recipe from becoming a rumour passed from landing to landing until it is wrong. You mix in a dry basin. Petals first, then lavender, then the orris dusted over as if you were flouring a board, then the cloves tucked through so they do not sit in a single pocket and burn the rest. A drop of the rosewater, only a drop, to wake it. The bags are small linen squares hemmed by someone upstairs in a winter that is not this one, drawn closed with a tape. 8 bags, enough for the family linen press and a spare for the housekeeper's own cupboard, which she will not ask for and which you will send anyway because that is how the two of you have learned to speak without speaking. The finished bags sit in a basket lined with paper. They look like nothing. That is their purpose. A dressing table in 1876 is easy to misread. By this year, a woman of the family can buy almost everything that once had to be made under her own roof. A chemist in Gloucester, and certainly a shop in Bond Street if the household is in town for the season, will sell cold cream in a pot with a printed label and a name that is not yours. Piers will sell soap. Rimmel will sell scent by the bottle. Roland will sell the oil for the hair. There are toilet vinegars already stoppered, tooth powders in tins, lavender water with a grocer's flourish on the wrapper. The trade has spent 30 years teaching the comfortable classes that a bought bottle is cleaner, more modern, more certain than anything stirred on a country slab. Some of that teaching is honest. A London house with a small staff and no garden to speak of often believes all of it, and in that house the still room shrinks to a cupboard and a kettle. A Gloucestershire house of this size does not believe all of it, or not yet. What you still produce is not a refusal of the shops. It is a calculation, and it is a habit, and it is a kind of pride that will never be written into the wage book. Bought cold cream costs what bought cold cream costs. A named pot from a London chemist may run to £1, sometimes more if the label is fashionable. And it arrives when the carrier arrives, and it is the same cream the next house along the valley is using. Yours costs the wax, the almond oil, the rose water you have already distilled, and an afternoon. 6 pots from 1 boiling, fresher than anything that has sat in a crate, made in the quantity wanted, not in the quantity a manufacturer finds convenient to pack. It can be altered by a note in the book if the lady finds it too heavy in July or too thin in January, and it does not leave the estate. That last point is not written down anywhere. It sits under every receipt that has not been given up. The same is true of the potpourri, of the furniture cream you have not made yet, of the flower waters already stoppered on the shelf, of the jam cooling behind the cupboard door. A grocer in town will sell damson now, in a jar with a printed collar. A perfumer will sell a sachet ready-filled. The house still makes both because the garden still gives both, and because a country house that buys what it can produce is understood quietly to have lost a kind of competence, not by the family, who may never think of it from one season to the next, by the staff, who notice, by the housekeeper who keeps the books and can see £1 leave the house that need not have left, by you. Then there is the book itself. Printed manuals have been telling women how to keep house for a generation. Isabella Beaton's sits in the housekeeper's room, heavy as a ledger, confident, a volume that speaks as if it invented the kitchen and the still room together. It did not. What Beaton gathered, and what the cheaper manuals gathered after her, came in large part from manuscript receipt books exactly like the one on your desk. Hands copying hands. A receipt for cold cream travelling from one county to another in a visitor's notebook, rewritten without a name, dated if you are lucky, altered if the last woman found the wax too dear or the rose water too weak. No author, no claim. The printed book puts a title on the spine and a price on the cover and makes the work look as if it began in a London office. The still room book keeps the older truth, which is that the knowledge was already here, unpaid, unsigned, and in daily use, long before anyone thought to sell it back to the households that had made it. You are writing in that tradition every time you date a label. You will not be cited for it. Beaton will. The 4 hands in your book will not be cited either. They have already vanished into the page, which is what pages of this kind are for. The lady's maid comes to the door as the cream has finished taking the last of its cool. She does not cross the threshold. That is the rule of this room as much as any lock, and she knows it as well as you do. You have the 6 pots in a small basket and 2 of the linen bags set aside, the ones meant for the dressing rooms rather than the press. She takes them with a nod that is not unfriendly and is not quite thanks. She is the last person in the chain who will be thanked. Upstairs, the cream will appear on the dressing table in the morning, a white pot that might have come from town. The lady will use it without asking where it was made. The lady's maid will be asked, perhaps, whether it is the usual, and she will say that it is, and the conversation will end there. Your hand is not in it. Your afternoon is not in it. The rose water you set to work before breakfast is not in it. This is not a grievance you carry about the house. It is the shape of the work. You have known the shape since the first year, when you still waited to be named and then understood that you would not be. She goes. Her skirts brush the passage. The door stays open a moment on the flagged dark, then you close it because the next work will smell of other things, and you do not want this one carried through the house like a boast. For a short while, the still room does not smell like itself. It smells like a shop in Bond Street, or like the idea of one that a country servant might hold. Wax and almond, rose on the turn of the air, a dry sweetness of orris and clove that belongs to drawers lined with paper and to rooms you are not sent to. It is a manufactured elegance, and you manufactured it, and it will not last. Sugar is patient. Sugar lives in the boards and in the grain of the table and in the air that the range keeps moving even when the fire is low. 10 minutes after the pots have gone, the Bond Street smell thins. 20 minutes, and it is only a ghost at the edge of the marble. By the time you have washed the slab and set the basin back on its shelf, the room has remembered what it is. Sugar again, a little fruit underneath, from the morning's boiling, cold ash at the edges, where the range never quite lets go. The honest smell of a workroom that will never be shown to a guest and would not know what to do if it were. The receipt book closes under your hand. You do not need a marker. You know the page. Outside, beyond the high window, the kitchen garden is still in full light. The west wall of this room has already gone into that indoor grey that means the afternoon has settled, but the garden will not have noticed yet. There will be shallots. There will be walnuts if the trees have begun to let them go. There will be the last herbs for the drying lines, and a boy at the door, or a walk of your own if the boy is wanted elsewhere. You wipe the slab until it is only marble. The stained fingers are a fact you will take into the next hour. The keys rest against your hip. The range ticks, not loudly, the way a range ticks when it has been asked for less than it can give and is not offended. A basket, empty, comes down from its nail. You lift the basket by its handles. The osier is worn smooth where other hands have done the same thing for years before yours. The back door of the still room opens onto a flagged passage and then the kitchen yard, and from the yard a gravel path runs along the north wall of the house toward the kitchen garden. You do not take a shawl. Late September in Gloucestershire still holds the day's heat in brick and stone, and the walk is short. The yard is quiet at this hour. The kitchen has its own afternoon, and the scullery maid is somewhere behind steam. A cat watches you from the mounting block and does not follow. Gravel shifts under your boots. Beyond the yard wall, the park begins. But you are not going into the park. You are going through a green door set in a high brick wall, the door that outdoor staff and indoor staff both use and neither treats as belonging to the other. The walled garden is still in full light, as you knew it would be. South-facing brick holds the sun and gives it back. Espaliered pears run along the warmest stretch in ranks, as even as a copybook. The late beans are nearly finished. Cabbages sit in their rows like a second, greener masonry. Somewhere a hoe is working, regular, unhurried. The air here is not the still room's air. Earth after watering. Crushed tomato leaf, though the tomatoes are nearly done. A sweetness from the last of the wall fruit that has dropped and not yet been gathered. The garden boy is already coming toward the door with 2 baskets, which saves you a longer walk and costs you the chance to choose. He is perhaps 14. His boots are darker than yours with soil. He does not come through into the still room passage. He sets the baskets on the flagstones just inside the green door and waits to be told they will do. Shallots. A great many of them, the skins the colour of old paper, the necks dried down the way they should be if they have been lifted and left in the sun. Walnuts in the second basket, the green husks split and darkening, the last of what the trees have decided to let go this week. And on top of the shallots, tied in 2 bunches with bass, the herbs you asked for yesterday, sage, thyme, winter savoury, a little mint that has not yet blackened. The boy has done it correctly. You nod. He waits 1 second longer than the nod in case there is a message for the gardener, and then he has gone back into the light. You could leave it there. The baskets would come to your table, and the work would begin, and the garden would remain a place you visit only when the boy is wanted elsewhere. But the gardener is at the far end of the asparagus beds, which are fern now, September fern, and he has seen you, and it is easier to speak now than to send word later about what you will need next week. This is worth taking slowly, because the still room's reputation for skill is only half the story, and the other half is growing in rows on the other side of this wall. A country house of this size is a machine for turning land into meals. The home farm sends milk, butter, cream, eggs, the occasional calf. The kitchen garden sends everything that can be grown inside 4 brick walls and a few glass houses. The still room's work, the work that looks like knowledge and is knowledge, depends entirely on what those walls produce in a glut and cannot hold. You do not invent a damson year. The trees invent it all at once in the last weeks of September, and either someone converts the surplus into jam and cheese and wine, or the fruit goes to the pigs and the wasps. The same is true of the shallots, of the walnuts, of the last herbs, of the cucumbers that came in July, and the red cabbage that will come in a fortnight. Your skill is real. It is also a function of somebody else's harvest. Household account books record the sugar you boil and the vinegar you draw. They rarely record the garden produce at its true replacement cost because it never passes through a shop. People who have tried to put a retail figure on a well-run walled garden of 3 or 4 acres attached to a house that keeps 20 indoor servants have come to numbers that sit somewhere between £200 and £400 a year, depending on the glass and the wall fruit, and whether one counts what is forced under frames. Your wage is £16. The head gardener's is higher than yours, often 2 or 3 times higher, and he has a cottage and coal and all the vegetables his own household can eat. Even so, the value of what leaves his walls in a single September would buy several years of either of you. The estate prefers not to think in those terms. The estate thinks in departments: outdoor, indoor, kitchen, still room, each with its own book, its own keys, its own grievance about the others. The truth is simpler and less convenient. Without the garden's September, your winter shelves are tea and loaf sugar and last year's bottles. Without your copper pan and your vinegar barrels, the garden's September is a problem that lasts 4 days and then becomes waste. The 2 rooms need each other and do not say so. The gardener has come as far as the box hedge. He does not offer his hand. You do not offer yours. He is a man in his 50s, outdoor authority in a slop jacket washed to the colour of the paths. He speaks to you as he would not speak to a housemaid, which is to say, he speaks about the work and not about the weather first. The walnuts will keep coming for another 10 days if the wind stays kind. The quinces on the east wall are a week off yet, perhaps more. There will be more sage if you want a second cutting before the month turns. The shallots are the last of the drying racks. After this, it is only what is in store. You thank him. You tell him the housekeeper will want extra horseradish before the first dinner of October and a confirmation of the late pears for stewing. He nods as if he had already known both things, which he may have. Then he goes back to the fern, and you take up the 2 baskets, and the green door closes on the light. Courtesy without equality. That is the whole of it. He will not come into your still room. You will not stand long in his potting shed. His chain of command runs to the agent and the master. Yours runs to the housekeeper, and through her to the same master who will never see either of you at the work you have just discussed. You are both specialists. You are not colleagues. The baskets are the treaty. Back in the still room, the light has gone further toward grey. You set the baskets on the big table, the one that takes a preserving pan at one end and still has room for crocks at the other. The shallots come out in a brown drift. The walnuts stain the osier. The herb bunches go up on the drying line that runs above the range, sage and thyme and savoury in a row, mint a little apart because mint will take over a room if you let it. In a week they will be dry enough to crumble. In a month they will be in paper bags on the herb shelf, dated in your hand. Pickling is the afternoon's real work, not the fine work of cold cream, not the sugar work of the morning. This is the work that smells of the cellar even while you do it in the light. The vinegar barrels stand on their stillage against the inner wall, 2 of them at present, bunged, the wood dark where the hoops have bitten. Malt vinegar bought from the oilman by the barrel because the still room goes through it the way the kitchen goes through coal. A third, smaller cask holds the paler vinegar you keep for the finer pickles, the ones that will sit in the front of the store and come up for the dining room. You knock the bung from the malt barrel and run off enough to fill the two big pans. The smell arrives at once. Sharp, warm, a little sweet underneath, the way malt always is. It occupies the room more honestly than rose water ever did. Spice bags next, cut from the scrap muslin in the left-hand drawer. Into each go black peppercorns, allspice, a few cloves, a slice of dried ginger, mustard seed, tied with thread, not too tight, so the vinegar can work through. These will ride in the crocks for weeks and then be fished out before the pickles come to table, or left in if the housekeeper prefers a stronger jar. The receipt book has two versions. You use the one in the older hand because it has been right for longer. The shallots take the most time, outer skins off, root plates trimmed, the thin silver skins underneath left on, or the shallot falls apart in the vinegar and you have mush instead of pickle. Your fingers, already marked from the morning's damsons, take on the smell of onion that no amount of washing quite lifts before evening. A bowl of dry salt waits at your elbow. The shallots go into it in layers and will sit for a few hours before the vinegar so that some of their water leaves and the finished pickle stays crisp. This is not invention. This is the book, and the woman before you, and the woman before her. The walnuts are a different matter. The green ones, the true pickling walnuts, went into brine in July when the shells inside were still soft enough for a pin. These September nuts are ripe, or nearly. Some will be dried and stored in crocks of salt for the winter dessert plates. Some will go for ketchup, the kernels bruised, covered in vinegar, left to stand, then boiled up with spices and reduced until the liquor is dark and sharp and keeps. Walnut ketchup is one of the still room's quieter products. It goes upstairs in small bottles and is used a spoonful at a time on cold meat, and nobody in the dining room wonders where it came from. Crocks, brown stoneware glazed inside, the large ones that hold a gallon and the smaller that hold a quart. You scald them with water from the kettle, wipe them dry, set them in a row along the table's far edge. The ones that will take the shallots tonight, once the salt has done its work, stand ready with their wooden lids. The ketchup crock has a different shape, wider mouth, easier to stir. They will sit, once filled and covered, on the lower shelf of the store cupboard, in the cool, and they will not be opened until the weather has turned and the garden outside that green door is only earth and sticks and the memory of Rose. That is the point of this afternoon. You are putting September into stoneware so that January has something to open. The vinegar comes back to the boil with the spice bags in it. You watch the surface. You do not need to watch it as closely as sugar. Vinegar is forgiving in a way that a jam set is not. When it is hot through, it will wait in the pans until the shallots have given up their water, and then you will pack the crocks, pour, cover, label. The labels are plain. Shallot, September 1876. Family or hall, depending on the row. You will write them later when your hands are cleaner. 3 o'clock has come without a clock announcing it. You know it from the light and from the sound of the dining room above, where the table is not yet being laid but the room is being opened, shutters folded back. The first movements of a dinner for 18 beginning to travel down through the boards. Your work is already moving out of sight. That is its nature. The crocks will go into the dark. The herbs will dry into something that does not look like a garden. The ketchup will become a brown bottle with no mention of a tree. What housekeeping actually smells like at 3 in the afternoon in a still room in late September is not lavender and is not beeswax, not yet. It is vinegar. It is the skins of fruit from the morning still in the pail under the table, waiting for the garden waste. It is wet stone because you have slopped the flagstones once, already rinsing the scalded crocks, and the floor of this room never quite dries in a single hour. Onion, a thread of malt, the herbs on the line just starting to give themselves up to the heat of the range. No guest will ever stand here and breathe this. No book of household management quite puts it on the page. It is the smell of a house being made to last the winter, and it is ordinary, and it is the entire point. You leave the shallots in their salt. You leave the vinegar in the pans, off the boil now, the spice bags darkening. The range can hold a low fire for an hour without being watched. There is beeswax to melt before tea goes up, and the housemaids will want the furniture cream tomorrow, and the afternoon has not finished with you. The beeswax lives in a tin on the high shelf, wrapped in paper, the colour of old honey and nearly as hard. You lift it down with both hands. A country house of this size goes through a surprising weight of wax in a year. The estate hives supply some of it, rendered after the last taking and sent across by the gardener in lumps that still smell faintly of the frames. The rest comes from the oilman, priced by the pound, and you do not waste a scrap. 4 o'clock finds the vinegar pans cooling and the shallots still in their salt, which is as it should be. Those will wait. Furniture cream will not. The housemaids have been using the last of the previous batch on the dining room mahogany this week, and tomorrow they will want a fresh pot or two, because a dinner of 18 means that room will be gone over again after the guests have left. Every leaf of the table, every chair back, every door of the sideboard, the work goes on until the place looks as if no meal has ever been eaten in it. You set a small enamel pan on the cooler plate of the range. Beeswax does not like a fierce heat. It scorches, and scorched wax makes a cream that streaks and then has to be cut back with more turpentine and done again. You shave the block with a kitchen knife, thin curls falling into the pan. The same motion you used this morning on the loaf sugar, though the smell is another country entirely. Turpentine from the oilman's tin is measured into a jug. The receipt in the still room book is brief, written in a hand older than yours. Equal parts by weight, melted slowly, stirred until the two become one, poured off into pots before it sets. No flourishes, no advice about what to do if it goes wrong. The women who wrote in that book assumed you would already know or would learn by wasting a pan. The room changes as the wax begins to go. What was vinegar and onion this afternoon gives way to something resinous and clean, the smell of a church pew being done over, or a carpenter's bench at the end of a long day. Turpentine is sharp at the back of the throat if you stand too close to the pan. You do not stand too close. You stir with a wooden spoon kept for this work alone, because once a spoon has met turpentine, it is no use for jam, and you have already spent the morning defending sugar from every other smell in the house. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a house like this. Visitors, and a good many of the people who later write about such houses, see the shine and take it for a quality of the furniture. Mahogany that deepens with age, oak that has been loved, rosewood that simply is that colour, as if colour were a kindness the tree had done the room. They do not see the cream. They do not see the woman who made the cream, or the women who will spend an hour tomorrow on their knees and on their feet working it into the grain with old linen, then buffing it off again until the surface gives back the windows. A great house that looks as if no one labours in it is a house in which a great deal of labour has been spent on the appearance of ease. The still room is one of the departments that quietly supplies that appearance. You do not sweep, you do not lay fires, you do not carry cans or fold linen. What you do is manufacture the substances that allow other people to make the house look uninhabited by work. The economics of that manufacture sit in the still room book and in the oilman's bills, if anyone cared to set them beside each other. Beeswax in 1876 runs at something like 1 6d to 2 shillings a pound, depending on colour and purity, dearer if it has been bleached for the finer work. Spirits of turpentine are cheaper by the gallon, but you use them freely, and a house this size may go through several gallons in a season of polishing. Linseed oil, when the receipt calls for it, comes by the pint from the same oilman who supplies the lamp oil and the blacking, a week's furniture cream, the quantity the housemaids will work through the principal rooms between one Sunday and the next, costs more in materials than you earn in a day. No one upstairs thinks of it as a cost of display. It is simply how the rooms are kept. The rooms are kept because that is what rooms of this class do. they gleam. The gleam is taken for granted in the same way the fire is taken for granted. And the fire, like the gleam, is the product of a department that does not dine upstairs. You pour the finished cream into 2 stoneware pots, the same sort you use for cold cream, though no one would put this on a face. A circle of paper on each, dated in pencil. The pots go on the end of the table nearest the door, where the housemaids know to look. They will not come further in. They have never been invited to. The still room book stays closed on the desk while they are in the doorway. That is not unkindness. It is the same rule that keeps the kitchen maids on their side of the threshold and the footmen at the edge of the flagstones. Your room is a locked workshop. The things that leave it are finished things. The method stays. One of the housemaids comes at 4:15, the younger of the 2 who do the downstairs rooms. She has put on a clean apron, which means she has finished the bedrooms and come down to start on the passages before dinner. She stands in the doorway and does not put a foot across. You hand her the 2 pots. She takes them without reading the labels because she already knows what they are, and she thanks you in the voice used between servants who share a house and do not share a department. There is no hostility in it. There is also no curiosity. She will spend tomorrow morning working your cream into the dining room table, and she will never ask what is in it. If the cream streaks, she will bring the pot back, and you will know from the look of the surface whether she put it on too thick or whether you let the wax get too hot. That is the whole of the conversation the 2 of you will ever have about the work. This is the texture of rank below stairs, and it is finer than people upstairs imagine. You are not the housekeeper. You do not give this girl her orders. You are not a kitchen maid. She does not outrank you. The still room maid in a house of 20 indoor servants sits in a narrow place, specialist enough that the housekeeper cannot easily put another woman into your chair for a week, not quite upper enough to take tea in the housekeeper's room as a matter of course, trusted with keys the housemaids will never hold, invisible to the family in a way the lady's maid is not. The housemaids collect your pots. They do not enter your book. Your name, such as it is in this house, is the post. The post is the room. The room is locked. She is gone. The doorway is empty. The turpentine is already thinning, overtaken again by sugar and the faint ghost of damson from the morning's pan, which you have not quite got off the copper. Afternoon tea is assembled here. That fact surprises people who think of tea as a drawing-room invention, something that simply appears on a low table at 5, as if the silver and the thin cups generated it themselves. In this house, and in most houses of this size in 1876, the still room owns the tea. You own the caddies. You own the blend. You own today the seed cake that has been cooling on the marble since you turned it out before the damsons went on, and the loaf that will be cut to the thickness of a knife blade and buttered to the edges. The second tea blend is not the breakfast blend. Breakfast is stronger, a bigger proportion of the cheaper Indian leaf mixed through the china, because the men of the family drink 2 cups before they go out, and they like to know they have drunk something. Afternoon tea is lighter, more of the scented china, a smaller measure because the ladies will sit with it longer, and the cups are finer, and the point is not fortification. You unlock the caddy. The key is on your bunch, the same bunch that opened this door before 6 this morning. 2 spoons of the breakfast mixture go back into their tin. The afternoon mixture is made in a bowl, tipped into the small japanned caddy that travels upstairs on the tray, and the big caddies are locked again at once. No one in the drawing room will know the difference has been arranged. They will only know that the tea tastes as it always tastes at this hour. Seed cake is a still room cake. Butter, sugar, eggs, flour, caraway, a little milk, baked in a hoop and turned out when it will bear it. The receipt is in the book in the same spare hand as the furniture cream. You cut it into slices that will look generous on the plate and will not look like a kitchen cut. Thin bread and butter is more work than it sounds. The loaf must be yesterday's, or it will tear. The butter must be cool but not hard. Each slice is cut, buttered, stacked. The crusts come off. That is the housekeeper's standing instruction in this house for anything that goes upstairs. You work quickly. The tray is the footman's problem once it leaves your door. But the arrangement on the plates is yours, and a plate of bread and butter that looks slapped together will come back down as a remark. Not from the family, who may not notice. From the housekeeper, who will. A brief accounting because the tray itself is a small ledger. The tea in the caddy, even the afternoon blend, is among the dearest dry goods in the house. Good China tea in the middle of the 1870s still costs several shillings a pound, and a household of this standing does not buy the cheapest. The butter is the dairy's, which is to say it is the estate's, which is to say it has no shop price attached until you start imagining what it would cost to replace. The seed cake is eggs and butter and sugar, all of which have passed through your hands already today in other forms. None of this will be mentioned when the tray is set down in the drawing room. The drawing room will receive it as the drawing room always does, as if the room itself had produced a light meal at the correct hour, the way a clock produces the time. The footman comes for the tray at 20 minutes to 5. He has changed into enough of the afternoon livery to be seen on the main stairs. He takes the tray from the threshold. He does not comment on the cake. He never does. You watch the back of him go, the plate steady, the small caddy sitting in its place, and then the passage is quiet again. From the dining room, which sits somewhere above and to the left of you, the sounds have changed. Earlier it was shutters and the opening of a room. Now it is the table. Leaves going in or already in, the long cloth being thrown and settled. Silver set down in pairs, a faint regular chime that travels through the boards more honestly than voices do. 18 covers. That is a full table for this house, not a ball, not a crush, but enough that the dining room will be working at the edge of its ordinary capacity, and the kitchen will be working well past it, and you will be wanted for ices and quince cheese before the first course goes up. Your cream is already out of the room. Your tea is already on the stairs. The seed cake you baked will be eaten by people who will not wonder who mixed it. That is not a grievance, it is the design. A house of this class is arranged so that labor disappears at the point of consumption. The still room is one of the quieter parts of that arrangement. You wipe the marble, you put the butter back in the slate safe. The range has a low fire in it, enough for the next work, not enough to waste coal. Outside, September is going on being September. The light already thinking about leaving the kitchen garden. Inside, the vinegar is still in the pans, the shallots are still in their salt, and the dinner of 18 has begun to take on a sound. You wash the wooden spoon that has met the turpentine and hang it back on its nail. There will be ices to see to before long, and a quince cheese waiting to be turned out, and the spirit cupboard still locked as it has been since morning. The afternoon is not finished. It is only changing its work. The quince moulds have been waiting on the slate since Tuesday. You lift the cloth. 3 tins, fluted, each one holding a cheese the color of old amber, firm to the knuckle. A plate is set ready. The first mould goes into a basin of warm water, a slow count to 8, then invert. 1 tap with the heel of your hand. The cheese drops clean, ridged, complete, and the room takes on a smell that is fruit and sugar and something almost like roses, which is only quince being quince. The second mould comes as cleanly. The third sticks at the rim, a shorter dip, and it follows. You arrange them on a glass plateau with space left for the ice. The housekeeper's note asked for quince cheese by name. Whether someone upstairs remembered last year's or a guest is expected who will know the difference between a still-room cheese and the stuff a grocer sells in a jar is not your business. Your business is to turn it out without a crack. The ice arrived from the ice house wrapped in sacking, a single block the garden boy set on the flags without coming past the threshold. Late September, ice is the last of the winter store, cloudy, already wasting at the edges. You break it with the hammer into pieces the size of walnuts and pack the wooden pail in layers. Ice, then coarse salt, then ice again, the salt making the cold drop far enough to freeze cream. The sabatiere sits in the middle, pewter, lidded, a handle on the lid so the whole pot can be turned against the freeze. The mixture was made an hour ago and left in the slate safe to start cold. Cream, loaf sugar pounded fine, a spoonful of this morning's orange flower water, and raspberry pulp from the jars put up in July. You pour it in, set the lid, and take the handle. Turning an ice is not dramatic work. It is regular, slightly stubborn, and it cannot be left. Every few minutes the lid comes off and the long spatula scrapes the frozen film from the sides, folding it back into the liquid so the freeze happens evenly. Too fast and the ice comes out sandy. Too slow and you are still at it when the soup is already upstairs. The salt does most of the labor. You only keep the mixture moving and judge, by the pull of the handle and the look of the scrape, when it has gone far enough. The room grows colder around the pail. Fingers ache in a small familiar way. Steam from the kettle meets the cold and makes a brief fog that smells of metal and fruit. This is worth taking slowly, because the work in your hands is not kitchen work, and the house is quite clear about that even when no one says it aloud. A dinner of 18 will be understood by the people eating it as cook's achievement. Soup, fish, the removes, the roast, the game, the sauces that have to hold, and the vegetables that have to arrive hot. That is the kitchen's intelligence, and it is real intelligence, and it is never quite given that name. What you are making now belongs to a different ledger. Ices, molded creams, liqueurs, the cheeses of fruit, the things that appear after the cloth is drawn and the candles seem brighter. These have been still room work since the still room was a lady's room and not a servant's. Sugar work and distillation sat beside physic and scent. An ice was a proof of wealth and of command over the seasons, because the ice itself had been cut from a pond in January and held underground until the fruit was ready. When the lady stopped standing over the pans and a hired woman took her place, the classification stayed. The work remained locked, remained slightly aside from cook's range, remained the part of the meal that was allowed to look like art. Cook feels the border. You feel it. The kitchen maid, sent for a mould or a paper of isinglass, feels it without having language for it. A roast can fail and be called a misfortune. An ice that weeps or a jelly that will not turn out is called carelessness, because the still room is supposed to be exact. The difference is not in the skill required. Both rooms judge temperatures that cannot be read off a clock. Both rooms work from receipts that leave out the part you only learn by doing the thing 50 times. The difference is in the story the household tells about itself when guests are present. A country house in 1876 does not wish to look as though it merely feeds people. It wishes to look as though it can produce at the end of September a cold that tastes of July. That production happens in this room, on this stone, with a pewter pot and a block of last winter. The dining room receives it as if the season had simply continued. Printed manuals have tried to gather all of this into one volume. Isabella Beeton put ices a few pages away from boiled mutton, which was a kind of practical truth. The manuscript books in houses like this one never did. Your still room book keeps creams and ices in one section, in a hand older than yours, and the spirit receipts at the back in another, as if the book itself were a small argument about what this room exists to prove. No full name is signed under any of it. The intelligence is in the work, not in the credit. The handle has grown heavy. A last scrape, and the spatula leaves a clean ridge. Ready. You work the ice into the pewter mold, a fluted pillar that will stand on the plateau and be looked at, and pack the mold back into the pail under fresh ice and a cloth. It will wait there until it is called for. Ices do not sit about on a sideboard. They go up at the last possible minute, and they are eaten before they remember they are perishable. Your hands are cold and stained. The raspberry has left a dark crescent along the cuticle of your left thumb. You rinse it. It will still be there in the morning. The ice can sit. The cupboard cannot wait until later, because if a jelly upstairs needs a splash of wine, or if the papers for tomorrow's jars are to be ready, the brandy has to be measured while your hands are still your own and the housekeeper has not yet come down for the evening check. The key is the small one, worn smooth where your thumb finds it every time. The cupboard is oak, let into the wall between the tea shelves and the spice boxes. Lock replaced 2 years ago when the old one began to drag. The key turns and the smell comes out for a second, sweet and sharp, brandy and dry wood. And then you are looking at what the house trusts you with. 2 bottles of brandy, one opened and marked on the label in the housekeeper's hand with the date it was started. A bottle of white wine kept for jellies. A smaller bottle of spirit of wine nearly full, used by the spoonful for the finer essences and for nothing else. A jar of cherries put down in brandy in July, not ready, the fruit still dark and whole. You take down the open brandy, measure 2 spoonfuls into a cup for wetting the papers on any jars that go up tomorrow, and put the bottle back on the same ring it left on the shelf. The door shuts. The key turns. You do not stand there with it open. You do not taste. Nobody has written that instruction on the inside of the door. It is simply the condition attached to carrying the key. The cupboard is not large. What it represents is brandy of the quality kept here costs the household several shillings a bottle, and spirit of wine more than that, and both are watched because both can leave the still room for purposes the books will not like. Wine for jellies is ordinary stuff, but ordinary wine in an unlocked place thins out, and the housekeeper's accounts notice thinning. Your wage is £16 a year, paid quarterly, £4 at a time. A month of carelessness at this cupboard would cost more than a quarter's pay and would end the situation besides. Houses of this size treat missing spirit as a question of character, not of arithmetic. They hire a still room maid for honesty first and for a light hand with sugar second, though the newspaper notice will only say respectable and experienced in a gentleman's family, which is the same sentence in a quieter register. You have held these keys 4 years. The levels have been right every time the housekeeper checked them. That fact will not be written down anywhere that lasts. It exists as the lack of a different fact. A knock at the door. The first footman, already in livery, not stepping over the threshold. You give him the quince cheese on its glass, then the small dish of crystallized ginger from the spring, then the sugared almonds. He takes them as he takes everything without remark, which is the only remark required. The ice mold stays with you. It will go up later when the cloth is about to be drawn, when 18 people have eaten their way through cook's work and are ready to be shown yours. He is gone. His shoes on the back stairs, quick and trained. You will not taste the ices. You will not sit down to quince cheese in the servants' hall. Supper there will come after the dining room has been served, and it will be whatever the kitchen can spare from the joints and the pudding, bread, cheese, beer, if it is being given. The still room's dessert is accounted for upstairs. A mould that comes backlight is a mould that will be mentioned. You have never tested that rule. You are not hungry in that particular way, and you are not foolish in that particular way, and the 2 facts have kept you in this post. Above your head, the dinner of 18 is no longer a preparation. It has started. You know it from the floor, from the settled weight of a full room, from the faint, regular sound of service that is not conversation, chairs, a glass, someone laughing once, not for you. Cook will be in the worst of it now, the kitchen at full heat, the plates going out and coming back. Your range is the opposite. You bank it with ash and a little small coal, enough to hold until you want the kettle at the end of the evening, not enough to throw money into an empty grate. The copper pan is hanging, the marble is already clean. The spirit cupboard shows nothing but a closed door. For a minute the flags are only flags, and the room is only a room. The ice pail sweats onto the stone in a dark ring. The high window has lost the last of the September light. One of this morning's damson lids has drawn down tight, a small inward click you would miss if the house were louder. In half an hour the footman will come back for the mould. You will wrap it in a cloth, hand it across the threshold, and that will be the last thing you send up tonight that anyone in the dining room will see. Until then there is the spatula to wash, and the sabotiere lid to dry so it does not spot, and a stool by the table that you are allowed to use because no one is watching and your feet have been on this floor since before the house stirred. The dinner eats without you. The range ticks as it cools. The key to the spirit cupboard lies against the others at your waist, warm from your hand, ordinary as a tool, which is the most accurate thing that can be said about it. The dinner goes on above you for longer than the plates would suggest. Courses have a way of stretching when there are 18 covers and the wine is being poured with a free hand. You wash the spatula. You dry the sabotiere lid on a cloth until the pewter shows no watermarks. You put the stool back under the table because the housekeeper will come through before the night is finished, and a still room maid sitting down is a still room maid who has to account for the sitting. When the clock in the passage gives 9, the house has changed key. The dining room is still occupied, but the hurry has gone out of the service. You can hear it in the longer gaps between the swing of the green baize and the next set of footsteps. This is the hour the still room belongs to figures. You take the still room book from the desk and open it at this morning's page. The lamp on the desk is the only light you have raised since the range was banked, and it throws a small yellow circle that stops well short of the far cupboards. Outside that circle, the jars sit in their rows like a second set of accounts, dark and regular. You begin with sugar, because sugar is where a discrepancy shows first and is forgiven last. This morning you weighed what remained of the last cone and noted the pieces already nipped for the damsons. Tonight you weigh again. The brass weights click onto the scale in the old order, the large one first, then the smaller, until the beam hangs level. What has gone out is what the preserving pan took, plus the sifted stuff for the seed cake, plus the dusting for the quince cheese, plus the spoonfuls that went into the cold cream. You write the remainder in the out column and do the subtraction in your head before you put it on the page. The numbers agree. They usually do. Agreement is not the interesting part. The interesting part is that you are expected to be able to prove it. Tea next. The family caddy comes down from its shelf and is unlocked with the small key that lives on your ring and nowhere else. The blend you mixed before breakfast has been drawn on twice more, once for the breakfast trays and once for afternoon tea, and the caddy is lighter by the amount the book already predicts. Servant's tea is a coarser leaf in a separate tin, and that tin is not your responsibility in the same way, though you lock it all the same, because an unlocked tin in a still room teaches the house the wrong lesson. You close the family caddy, turn the key, and set the weight of what remains against this morning's figure. Again, the numbers hold. Spirit last, because spirit is the item that makes a housekeeper walk more slowly when she comes through the door. You unlock the cupboard. The brandy bottle you opened for the damson papers has gone down by the measure you wrote at noon. The wine for the jellies is untouched tonight, the ices having taken the place of a wine jelly on the dessert list. Nothing else has been shifted. You close the door, turn the key, and feel the bolt seat. Then you count the finished jars against the slate on the wall, family damsons in the front row, servants' hall jam behind, the quince cheeses that went up already struck through. One lid among the morning's batch has already drawn. Another is still sitting proud, not yet sealed, the air inside still working. You leave it. A jar will take its own time, and hurrying a seal is how you get a ferment in November. Here is something easy to misunderstand about a post like yours. People who write about country houses from the outside tend to talk about skill. They talk about a light hand with sugar, a nose for a set, the knack of a cream that will not oil. All of that is real, and you have it, or you would not have lasted 4 years. But when a housekeeper hires a still room maid, the first question she is allowed to ask, and the last one she is forgiven for skipping, is not whether you can make a marmalade. It is whether you can be left alone with a locked cupboard. Tea and loaf sugar and brandy are not romantic stores. They are portable, they are divisible, and they have a ready market in any market town a carrier can reach. A few ounces of the family's leaf, sold on or used in a way the book does not show, will not be missed by a guest at breakfast. They will be missed by the scale. Household account books of the period are full of small, tight words for this problem. Waste, shrinkage, loss in store. The language sounds like inventory, and some of it is inventory. Sugar takes up water. Tea dries. A cork fails and a bottle evaporates into the shelf. Any still room maid who has done a winter knows the honest losses and writes them where they belong. What the books are also doing, under those same headings, is keeping a moral tally. An ounce unaccounted for is not treated as a rounding error. It is treated as a question about character. That is why your references, when you came, mattered more than your receipts. A cook can be hired for the reputation of her pastry. A still room maid is hired for the reputation of her hands in a locked room. The character you brought with you said, in the compressed language of such papers, that you were sober, that you were honest, and that you had been trusted with stores. It did not need to say you were pleasant. Pleasant is for the rooms upstairs. Down here, the house wants a person who will not make the figures walk. The scrutiny runs in one direction. A dinner of 18 will send more wine back in the bottoms of glasses, more sugar in uneaten ices, more tea in pots that have stood too long than you could take from these shelves in a month of quiet evenings. Nobody will call that shrinkage. Nobody will ask the dining room to weigh what it did not finish. The moral problem, as the house defines it, lives where the keys are. It lives in the person who can open the caddy when no one else is in the room. It lives in you. You have always known this. You knew it the first week when the housekeeper stood in that doorway and watched you weigh the sugar without appearing to watch. You have not stopped knowing it. The knowing is part of the wage, though the wage does not say so. £16 a year, paid quarterly, is £4 at a time, and £4 will not buy the contents of the cupboard you have just locked. The retail value of a week's work from this room, the jams and the waters and the creams and the furniture paste and the tea that went up on trays, sits so far above your quarter that the comparison stops being arithmetic and becomes a kind of joke the house does not tell. You do not tell it either. You put the brandy figure in the book and you make the hand neat and you go on. The day's work has to be written before she comes. You dip the pen. The still room book is a thick, plain volume bound in boards that have darkened at the corners from other women's thumbs. 4 hands have used it that you can distinguish, and perhaps a 5th in the very front pages, paler, the ink gone brown. None of them signed a full name, a date, a quantity, a short note when a receipt was altered or a batch failed. That is the whole of a signature in this room. You write the way they wrote, because that is how the book remains useful. Damsons, family, so many pounds of fruit, so much loaf, so many jars. Damsons, hall, a smaller sugar, a coarser set, the back row. Quince cheese, turned and sent up. Cold cream, so many pots to the lady's maid. Furniture cream, beeswax and spirit of turpentine for the housemaids in the morning. Rose water and orange flower water, the small still, the receivers filled, blackcurrant rob-checked, lemon barley made, the lavender bottle sent up through the housekeeper, tea mixed, coffee roasted, chocolate scraped, ices worked and sent. You do not write that your feet have been on the flags since before the house stirred. You do not write that the dining room laughed once and that the laugh was not for you. The book has no column for that. Your hand is spare. It matches the hand before yours closely enough that a stranger, opening the book in 10 years, might think one woman had done it all. That is not an accident. A still room book that starts performing itself, that starts putting flourishes in the margins or little remarks about the weather. is a book that has stopped being a tool. You blot the last line. You leave the page open so the housekeeper will not have to turn it. She comes at the time she always comes, which is after the dining room has moved toward the drawing room and before the upper servants sit down to their own supper. You hear her on the flags in the passage, not hurrying. She has a way of arriving that makes the room stand up straighter without anyone giving an order. You are already on your feet. The lamp is trimmed. The book is waiting. She takes the book first. She always does. Her eye goes down the page the way yours did, sugar to tea to spirit to jars, and she does the same arithmetic you did, only faster, because she has been doing it in other rooms and other years, and she no longer needs the beam of the scale to tell her when a number is wrong. She asks one question about the brandy, and you answer it. She asks nothing about the ices. The ices have already been praised, if they were going to be praised, in a room you will not enter, and the praise, if it came, will have attached itself to the table and not to the sabotiere. Then the keys. This is the part of the evening that looks like ceremony and is in fact audit. You unhook the bunch from your waist and lay it on the desk in the order she prefers: the still room door, the store cupboards, the tea caddy, the spirit cupboard, the small key that opens the medicine shelf. She does not take them up. She counts them with one finger, touching each bow, and you count with her in your head, the same count you have done every night of the 4 years. They are all there. They are always all there. The count is not for the missing key. The count is for the habit of there being no missing key. The spirit cupboard, she checks herself. She turns the key you have already turned, feels the bolt, and then does the thing that is particular to this house, which is to set a wafer of paper across the crack of the door and press it with her own seal, a small plain seal that is not a crest and does not need to be. In the morning, the paper will be intact, or it will not. If it is not, the conversation will not be long. You have never had that conversation. You intend never to have it. She takes the spirit key off your ring and puts it on her own, which is the rule after dark. The rest she leaves with you. The still room is still yours to lock. She looks once more at the jars, not counting them so much as confirming the look of the shelf, the way a person confirms a room she already knows. She tells you the grocer's man will come in the morning and that the order you wrote at 11 will stand. She tells you the extra dessert went well, which is as close as this exchange will come to thanks, and is not nothing. Then she is gone, the passage taking her toward the housekeeper's room and the last of her own books, and the still room is yours again for the few minutes it takes to shut it. You put the still room book back on the desk, open at tomorrow's blank, the pen wiped, the ink capped. You go once along the cupboards and try each door with your hand, not because you doubt the locks, but because this is how the night is finished. The medicine shelf, the tea, the sugar loft, the spice boxes, the vinegar does not lock. The barrels are too heavy to be a temptation of the same kind. The marble is cold now. The range, banked hours ago, has gone down to the dullest red under the ash and makes the small irregular sounds of iron giving up its heat. You will want the kettle in the morning, and not before. At the door, you look back, which you do not always do. The lamp is out. What light there is comes from the passage behind you, a thin wedge on the flags, enough to show the front row of jars and the edge of the table, and nothing of the still in the corner. One of the damson lids, not the one that drew earlier, is just beginning to pull. You hear it as you stand there, a faint inward sound, the bladder tightening as the air in the jar cools. It will be done by morning. You will write it as sound in the book if it is sound, and you will open it in December if the house is still eating damsons in December, which it will be. You step out. You lock your own door last, the way you found it this morning, the way the woman before you found it, the key turning twice because the lock is old, and the second turn is the one that seats. The bunch at your waist is lighter by the spirit key, and heavier by the day. Behind the door, the range goes on making its small noises, and the jar goes on taking its seal, and none of that requires you. The passage is dim, the back stairs wait. You put the still room key in your pocket with the others you're allowed to keep overnight, and you leave the locked workshop to its sugar and its dark and its slow chemistry, which will go on without a witness until 5:30. The back stairs take you up through the house the same way they took you down this morning, only now the treads know your weight and do not creak as they did in the dark before 6. You climb by habit, one hand on the rail, which is worn smooth where every indoor servant has held it for 20 years, the other gathering the print skirt so it does not catch. The smell of the still room comes with you. Sugar and dried rose and a thin edge of vinegar that the wash will not take off tonight. It lives in the folds of the holland apron and in your hair, which has been under the cap since 5:30 and has done a day's work of its own in steam. The servants' attic is 2 flights above the principal bedrooms and a world away from them. The passage here is narrower. The boards are bare. Someone has left a candle in a tin sconce at the turn, burned down to a thumb's width, enough to show the line of doors and the one that is yours. You share the room. The other bed is already occupied, the occupant turned to the wall, breathing the even breath of a person who finished an hour ago and has earned the right to be unconscious. You do not speak. Neither of you has spoken after 10 in the 4 years you have slept in this room. The arrangement is older than either of you and requires no discussion. You set the candle you carried on the washstand. 1 candle. The housekeeper does not issue 2 for an attic. The flame makes a small, honest circle. The basin, the jug, the cracked soap, the hook behind the door, the edge of your own bed with the blanket folded the way you left it. Beyond that circle, the room is brown and cold. September has not yet put a frost on the roof slates, but the attic never holds the day's heat. You feel it in your shoulders as soon as the door is shut. The bunch of keys comes off first. You hang it on the nail that has always been there, driven into the plaster beside the washstand by someone who held this post before the woman before you. The keys settle against one another with a sound you know in your sleep. The stillroom key is among them. The spirit key is not. That one is downstairs in the housekeeper's keeping until morning, which is as it should be, and which you do not resent, because resentment is a luxury this house does not budget for, and you have never applied for it. The print dress comes off the way it went on, in an order you could perform in the dark. Cap first, then the apron, then the dress itself, then the outer petticoat. You hang what can be hung. The holland apron will need a proper wash tomorrow if the damson has set in the hem, which it has. You can see the stain even in this light, a dark thumbprint of September that no amount of careful work quite prevents. The dress smells of the range and of fruit skins and of the beeswax you melted at 4. You will wear it again in the morning because you have 2 print dresses, and this is the better of them, and because a still room maid is not issued a fresh gown for every day of preserving season. At the washstand you pour from the jug. The water is cold, as it was at 5:30, as it always is. You wash your face and your neck and your hands. The hands take longer. The damson has dyed the cuticles, and the pads of the fingers a colour that will fade in 3 days if you are lucky and a week if you are not. You work the soap into the stains because that is what you do, not because you expect them to come clean. The cold cream you made this afternoon is downstairs in pots that have already gone up to the dressing rooms. You do not keep a pot for yourself. The receipt is not written for you. You dry on the towel that is yours, which is thinner than it was in the spring, and you sit on the edge of the bed to take down your hair. The smell of sugar and herbs is strongest then, released from the plaits, a private inventory of the day that no book records. Rose from the still, lavender from the linen bags, a ghost of orange flower, clove from the potpourri. Under all of it, the honest kitchen smell of boiled fruit, which is the smell that will be in the pillow if you do not rinse it out, and you do not have the water or the will to rinse it out. The other woman in the room does not stir. Below you, the house is performing its last quiet functions. A door closes 2 floors down. A window is latched. Someone in the yard is seeing to a horse that came with a guest and will leave in the morning. None of that is yours. Your work ended when the lock seated. You sit a little longer than you need to, the candle shortening, and you look at the objects of the day without arranging them into a story. the keys on the nail, the stained fingers in your lap, the print dress on the hook, still holding the shape of your shoulders. Downstairs, on the still-room desk, the book is closed, the pencil laid beside it, today's line written in the same spare hand as the women who came before you. You can see the page without being in the room. Sugar used, tea blended, damsons put up, cold cream sent up, furniture cream for the housemaids, quince cheese for the dessert, ices worked and collected, spirit cupboard sealed. That is what the book holds. It does not hold the heat of the copper pan, or the moment the scum came cleanly, or the particular satisfaction of a lid drawing down on a jar that will keep until Christmas. Books of this kind are not written for satisfaction. They are written so that the next person, or the housekeeper, or the mistress on the rare morning she asks, can see that nothing is missing. You ran a small factory today. That is the plain word for it, and it is better than the pretty ones: food, medicine, scent, and polish. Breakfast beverages for a family that will never stand in your doorway. Flower waters for dressing rooms you are not invited to enter. A cupboard of simples kept in date and in order. A week's worth of jam in 2 qualities. Cold cream measured to the receipt. Potpourri the housemaids will distribute without knowing the proportions. Pickles that will sit in the dark until the kitchen garden is empty. Beeswax and turpentine turned into the shine that makes a dining room look as if no one works in this house. Dessert ices and a quince cheese for 18 people who will praise the cook if they praise anyone, and who will not think of the still room at all. You ran it well. The range was lit on time. The stores opened in order and closed in order. The still did what a still is supposed to do. The damsons took their set. The cream did not separate. The ices went up firm. The book balances. The keys were counted. No one had to come and find you wanting, which is the highest compliment this house knows how to pay, and which is paid by silence. That competence is real. It has a weight. You can feel it in your hands the way you can feel the stain. 4 years in post is not an accident. A still room maid who cannot be trusted with the spirit cupboard does not last 4 years, and a still room maid who cannot bring a preserve to the right set does not last 1 season. You know the difference between a syrup that will keep and a syrup that will ferment. You know how much loaf sugar 100 weight ought to yield in finished pots. You know which of last summer's dried herbs have gone dull and which will still perfume a linen bag. You know the border with the kitchen, and you keep to your side of it, which is a skill of its own and not a small one. None of that arrived with the print dress. It was learned, and it was kept, and it was practiced today from 5:30 until the lock turned. The system you practiced it in was not chosen by you. The receipts in the book are not your property. They belong to the house. They were in 4 hands when you came, and they will be in 5 when you go, and the 5th will not be asked to remember your name any more than you were asked to remember the name of the woman whose writing you first had to decipher. If you marry, the post ends. That is the rule, spoken and unspoken, in every house of this size in this county in this year. The work you do would be called instinct then, or housewifery, or the sort of thing a capable woman simply knows. And it would be unpaid, and it would be done in a kitchen a fraction of this one, without a locked cupboard, and without a wage. If the family retrenches, or if a new housekeeper prefers to buy in what you make, or if the still room is folded back into the kitchen the way some London houses have already begun to fold it, the post ends the same way. £16 a year, paid quarterly, is what the ledger will show you cost. It will not show what you produced. The retail value of a single week of your output, counted at grocer and chemist prices, sits beside that wage like a quiet joke that no one in the steward's room is paid to find funny. This is not a complaint about the house. The house is doing what houses of this kind have always done. It takes skilled work, puts it behind a locked door, feeds it and houses it and pays it just enough to keep it, and then presents the results upstairs as if they had arranged themselves. The dining room and the drawing room get written down. The still room does not. You have always known this. Knowing it does not make the work less well done, and doing the work well does not make the knowing less true. Both things stand. They have stood all day. They will stand in the morning when you come down and light the range again. The candle has burned to a pool. You pinch it out rather than let it gutter because tallow is not free and because the other woman in the room is asleep and a dying candle is a restless light. The dark that follows is the ordinary dark of an attic, not quite black. A little grey where the slates are thin and the moon, if there is a moon, finds the gaps. You lie down. The pillow takes the smell of your hair, sugar, herbs, a trace of the spirit you measured and did not taste. The blanket is adequate. You have slept under it for 4 Septembers. For a while you hear the house the way you heard it on the stairs. A latch, a settling board, the far muffled life of rooms that are not yours. Then even that thins. What remains is the particular quiet of a building that has finished with its people for the night and has not yet started with them again. Downstairs, 2 flights below the principal bedrooms and a locked door away from anyone who might pass, the still room holds its dark. The range is only iron now. The table is a pale rectangle if there is any light at all, which there is not. The front row of jars stands where you left it. One of them, a damson, the lid you heard beginning to pull when you stood in the doorway, finishes what it started. The bladder draws in the last fraction. There is a small click, no louder than a nail tapped once on stone, the seal taking for good. You are not there to hear it. You are already asleep, or nearly, the keys on the nail, the book closed, the factory shut, the day's work holding in the dark without you, the way it was always meant to.